We have finally made it to Selection Sunday. Welcome to another PFF grade release show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman, breaking down all 9 conference championship games from yesterday, releasing the PFF grades, the stat that told the story, the most impressive part from each game, and of course, Dalton, at noon, which is why we're going a little bit later in this episode, we will be live reacting to the official 12-team college football playoff bracket, the first ever 12-team bracket in college football history. We'll be live reacting to it when it happens around noon here on the show.
Yeah, and of course, some people will be extremely happy and some extremely upset, but kind of a strange conference championship weekend. Huh?
Yeah.
Started out with some blowouts, but last night it got real fun, didn't it? Starting with the 3:30 game, and then, well, those night games in the game we were at, especially Penn State, Oregon. I mean, that got fun. I don't think we thought it would turn into the shootout that it did, but man, it was a good day yesterday for sure. After kind of a dud on Friday, I would say, with the 3 games on Friday being blowouts. It was surprising to see as many blowouts as we did.
Some blowouts early on Saturday, too.
And this entire weekend of all weekends is the weekend where we got, like, it felt almost for a while like the most boring college football weekend, but it's definitely sped up. College football always gives you something, doesn't it, every single week, and it certainly gave us a lot to talk about going into the playoffs.
The 3 games that we're going to start off with were easily the best games. Every other game was pretty much a blowout.
Yeah.
Every other one, besides the 3 that we're going to start off with today. Before we start off with those games, I want to remind you guys, you can get all of these stats that we're going to talk about here on this show. You can get it with a PFF Plus subscription. So sign up today at pff.com and get access to all of the player grades, team grades, and advanced analytics and stats for every player in college football, not only the players that we're talking about today, and also every player in the NFL as well. And you get access to our beautiful 2025 NFL mock draft simulator. Our lead draft analyst, Trevor Sikkema, has over 300 prospects in that mock draft simulator, which means you could do a full 7-round mock draft if you want to for your team, for another team, or if you want to, all 32 NFL teams. You could do a full mock draft as well. You could trade players. You could trade picks. Also, PFF Plus gets you access to the best fantasy tools on the planet made by the great Nathan Yankee, one of the best fantasy analysts on the planet. And, of course, you get access to all of our betting tools as well. So you get quite literally everything on the spectrum of football between college football, NFL player grades and analysis, NFL draft, and betting and fantasy. Everything you could want for football you get with the PFF Plus subscription. So sign up today at pff.com. All right, Dawn. First game we're talking about today is the SEC championship game between number 5 Georgia taking down number 2 Texas 22-19 in overtime. Maybe the most beautiful, hideous game I've ever seen in college football, really. But it was an awesome game. We were up against it because we were trying to get back to our seats to watch the Oregon-Penn State game. That game was going on. It was very close to kickoff when that game ended, but it was an awesome game. Let's go over the grades first for each team, starting off with the Georgia Bulldogs. Highest graded player was Dalen Everett with an 85.5 grade. Offensive guard Tate Ratledge, 77.6. Chaz Chambliss, the edge defender, 74.9. KJ Bolden, the true freshman safety, 73.9. CJ Allen, the linebacker, 73.8. And how about Gunnar Stockton being the quarterback that we have to go with here? Because, of course, Carson Beck got hurt at halftime. He finished with a 54.8 grade in this game. For Texas, Andrew Makuba, 82.1, the safety. DeAndre Moore Jr., 81.2. Jahdae Barron, 80.1. Jalen Gilbo, the corner, 74. Offensive guard DJ Campbell, 73.9. And Quinn Ewers with an 86 grade. And we'll dive into that more because I think there's a lot of people saying, how on earth did Quinn Ewers get an 86 grade for yesterday's game? We'll dive into that a lot more as we get into it, Dom. But for you, the stat that told the story in this game.
Okay, so it was every week there's a game I watch, and I come on either this show or the NFL show with Trevor, and I go, this team should have won the game, but they didn't finish drives. This week, it was this game for Texas. They, by every metric, all total yardage, the grading, pretty much by everything, Texas should have won this game. On top of the fact that Carson Beck got hurt just before halftime, and Gunnar Stockton played the rest of the way until the last snap when Beck miraculously came on just for the handoff when I don't know how everybody on Texas sideline didn't know they were running because Carson Beck was incapable of throwing the football.
Yeah.
He could barely even hand it off, and Georgia scored the touchdown anyway. But for me, usually it's a red zone thing. I'm going to expand it a little more. It's the fact that Texas, 6 field goal attempts, okay, and it just kind of encapsulates their inability to finish drives. They got into Georgia territory on 8 out of their 11 drives, all right? And they only scored 1 touchdown all day. 0 for 3 in the red zone, 2 field goals and 1 missed field goal. And one of those was the field goal they kicked in overtime when the red zone was basically given to you, right? And Quinn Ewers, there's several splits here. One is first half, second half. You're going to talk about that. The other one is very much because of him inside the Georgia 30. This is where I cut this off, okay? Before they got to the Georgia 30-yard line, his grade in this game was a 92.8.
Wow.
There were times when Quinn Ewers, especially in the first half and outside of the red zone or getting near it, where he made really big-time throws, and Texas receivers had 6 drops and made the traditional numbers not look as good, and they just didn't execute as a team. Inside the Georgia 30-yard line, he had a 44.4 passing grade. Ewers didn't finish drives, the team didn't finish drives, everything shut down, and Georgia bent all day, but they didn't break. Bert Auburn was 4 for 6 on his field goals. You just had this situation where Texas, I told you before the game, I think Texas is the more talented between the two teams. First game came down to turnovers and just not being able to run the ball and not being able to handle blitzes. But Texas was, for the most part, the better team in this game. But if you don't finish drives and you're kicking field goals or you're coming away empty, this is what can happen. You let a team that's maybe, I think, slightly less talented, and you leave them hanging in the game, and this is how they can win it. You give them one opportunity in overtime, and Texas actually had to tie the game at the end of the fourth quarter, and then it went to overtime. I mean, it just was a classic case. Again, I see it every single week of the better team overall probably didn't win, and that's because they didn't finish drives. If you don't get 7s instead of 3s and 0s, you leave the door open for a team with its backup quarterback in this case, to win a ball game.
And the other one, Dawn, if you don't take advantage of your quarterback playing out of his mind, you're probably going to lose games as well. And Quinn Ewers, and I'll give him credit, we on the show, even in the preview, said, hey, Texas might have a Quinn Ewers problem. Like, they might need to have a quick hook for him and go to Arch Manning in this game, because obviously Quinn Ewers in that game against Georgia was horrible. He had a 30 grade against Georgia in that one. 7 turnover-worthy plays is tied for the most by any quarterback in the country over the last 5 years. In the first half, he was on fire. He had a 92.7 passing grade in the first half, Dawn. But the stat that told the story here is not his passing grade in the first half. Is that they had 6 points in the first half. 6 points when your quarterback has a 93 passing grade is unacceptable.
Played, I would argue, his best half of the season.
I would agree.
And the interception on the first drive, not his fault. Ball kind of tipped around, and Dalen Everett came down with it. I mean, he was terrific in between the drops and just their inability to finish drives. They have to take advantage of that.
He had 3 big-time throws in the first half alone. One of them was dropped, and one of them was a Matthew Golden touchdown that was dropped. So one of his big-time throws was a touchdown throw that was dropped. Texas receivers in the first half alone, you mentioned it, they had 5 drops in the first half. 5. That's usually like a lot for a whole game, and they had 5 drops in the first half. When your quarterback is that red hot against Georgia, against Kirby Smart, you better capitalize. You better go into halftime with like 24 points on the board already with your quarterback playing that hot. And in the second half, he had a 60.1 passing grade. Second half in overtime, I should say. He had a 60.1 passing grade, really came back down to earth, and then the Texas offense stalled out again. So when you have a quarterback playing that well with a 93 passing grade and you could only score 2 field goals with that, that's unacceptable, honestly. And I think that is, listen, that's why the grade is so high overall, is because he was that freaking good in the first half. The problem was in the second half when he cooled off, that's when they started to play a little bit better, but it was just too little too late at that point. And you better take advantage of that in the first half. And Texas as a team did not take advantage. And, we've been saying it all year, Dawn. It's really been about Texas. Yeah, they're so good around Quinn Ewers, but Quinn Ewers is the one who's kind of been screwing it up lately. In the first half, it was actually Quinn Ewers that was leading the charge, and everyone around him was screwing up. So it was kind of the opposite in the first half, and that's why ultimately Texas, I think, lost this game.
And much is always made of the Kirby Smart speeches and halftime speeches and things like that. And I have to think down 6-3 at halftime with as bad as the first half went, as bad as everything went offensively, and then the exclamation with Carson Beck getting hurt, and we'll see what his status is in the coming weeks. He had to have gone in and told his team at halftime, we may have just played the worst half of football we played all season, and we're down 6-3. Even if it's Gunnar Stockton out there, we don't know yet with Carson Beck, if he's going to be out, we have a shot to win this game because we can make stops and we can manufacture offense. And as long as we're just any better than we were in the first half, because Georgia was, they were just awful in the first half of this game, especially offensively. They established nothing, and then Beck got hurt. I think that's exactly what Kirby told his team was, we're in this. Don't go all doom and gloom on me. We played like crap for a half, but we're down 6-3. This is a ball game. And Gunnar Stockton comes right in and gets a touchdown drive and puts him up 10-6 and puts a jolt into him. I know he kind of struggled from thereafter, especially the interception late in the fourth quarter really could have hurt him. But you've got a moment here where I think it's about Kirby Smart just keeping his team on track through adversity. And Texas did not take advantage. This game could have easily been over at halftime the way Georgia played in the first half. And Kirby kept them in the pocket, and this is what they do. This is the part where people talk about the championship experience, and that's really why you don't want to play Georgia on top of Kirby Smart, the defensive schemes and all that. This is why. Because I'm not sure how many other teams and how many other coaches in the country win this exact game with the script the way it went.
So let's talk more about Georgia. Most impressive part of this game for you?
Give me Dalen Everett out there at corner. Look, in a game like this on defense, sometimes you just need somebody to step up, whether it's a superstar, maybe a guy we don't talk about as much. I don't think we've talked about Dalen Everett quite as much as we do a Malachi Starks or a Jalen Walker or somebody like that. But 2 interceptions, you could argue, were maybe the 2 biggest plays in the game, right? The first drive of the game when Texas was coming in to score and he catches the deflection for the first interception. The interception in the fourth quarter was just spectacular. I mean, I'll tell you what, I watched a few of these snaps this morning. Dalen Everett in man coverage was just fantastic. And then you had the first down play in overtime on the corner route. It was kind of an ISO corner route where they were still trying to attack him, and a pass breakup there too in overtime, and eventually Texas kicking a field goal again. Dalen Everett in man coverage in this game was spectacular. 9 targets, 3 catches allowed, 47 yards total, 2 interceptions, the pass breakup, and an 84.8 coverage grade. He was the best player on Georgia's defense. And obviously, he gave up a couple of catches and he had a pass interference late in the game that, could have hurt him, but he came back, had the pass breakup, made plays when they needed to, and he was just terrific.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was outstanding. And he's a guy that I think has been really underrated in the whole NFL draft process as well. I think that's a guy that you and I are probably going to be a lot higher on than most people going into the NFL draft, if he decides to go to the NFL draft. I'm saying on the Georgia defensive side, obviously, I'm going with the Georgia run defense. They completely shut down the Longhorns in this game and really made that offense solely reliant on Quinn Ewers. They were solely reliant on Quinn Ewers. Texas had 58 rushing yards total in this game. They averaged 2.6 yards per carry. It's their fewest rushing yards and fewest yards per carry since 2022 when they played TCU. Negative .463 EPA per run. Dalton, they had 2 runs that went for 25 yards combined. Their other 20 carries went for 33 yards combined. So they had 2 good runs in this game. The other ones, they averaged like 1 yard per carry, essentially, or a little bit over 1 yard per carry on the other 20 runs in this game. If you make Texas completely one-dimensional offensively, you have a great shot because we talked about before, Quinn Ewers, you have the hot in the first half, and then you have the cold in the second half. And if you're solely relying on Quinn Ewers to be hot the entire game, probably not going to work out for Texas too well, and that's really what happened in this one.
And something to note here, and I'm fact-checking this right now because I remember this being a thing. I believe, yes, Texas' 2 lowest rushing totals by far. In every other game this season, aside from the 2 Georgia games, they have at least 130 yards rushing. In the 2 Georgia games, they have 88 and 58. That's Georgia. Look,
about 130, yeah, combined.
Right,
yeah.
the two combined. You're talking about that's 146 right there.
Yeah.
So I mean, even then, well below their average of what they do in every other game this season. Georgia, there's 2 constants on the field with them. We've seen it all year. Look, Beck's been inconsistent. There's times where the pass rush is inconsistent. The receivers lead the country in drops. 2 constants: pass protection on offense, especially in the interior. And Tate Ratledge was great in this game. And their run defense, I won't question their run defense one bit. Michael Williams and all those guys up front, they can stop the run without question. It'll be interesting to see who they get as a matchup after their bye and into the quarterfinal. About, are they going to play a run-heavy team? And is that the type of team that they would rather see going, okay, our run defense might be the greatest strength of our whole team, because it's every single week with this. It's one of the few constants, right? No matter what their offense looks like, if they can stop the run, make a team one-dimensional, then you make a team throw into Dalen Everett and Malachi Starks and everything they have on the back end and Kirby's coverages. Look, without Carson Beck, we don't think they can win a national title. It's been done before. Backups can win championships. We've seen it in Super Bowls. We've seen it. You remember Cardale Jones at Ohio State, runs like that. But they're always a threat, Georgia. They have Kirby. And he's going to go out there and coach his best game, and they're going to go out there and play hard as hell like they did in the second half of this game, no matter who's at quarterback. And they're going to win other ways than just this is what they do. They don't air it out like that, like in Oregon, or like Texas or some of these other teams. They can win games other ways, and they proved it again in this game. Kirby Smart, just an incredible job in this game. The game plan first to once again stop the Texas rushing attack, and then to keep his team in line after Carson Beck got hurt. It's as good a coaching job as he's done all year.
It's a phenomenal job by Georgia and Kirby Smart, but I'd be remiss not to mention the two key injuries that I know one's been out the entire year, so it matters still. But C.J. Baxter, the running back, obviously he would have been their top running back this year. He was a 5-star recruit a couple years ago coming out of high school. Everyone thought after Jonathan Brooks left, he was like, okay, this is the new guy for Texas. He, of course, goes down in the preseason with an injury, out for the entire year. And then also Calvin Banks Jr., probably maybe the best left tackle in college football this year. I would argue the best left tackle in the NFL draft. He obviously was out in this game as well. That's another big loss for that offensive line too. So Texas overall had a 62.7 run blocking grade in this game. So wasn't great, and obviously also the rushing without C.J. Baxter, which I know they've been out with him all year, but it's another big loss for that Texas run game as well. And it's going to be interesting now, Dalton. Before we move on to the next game, I want to talk about these two teams in the grand scheme of things now. Where do you think – so Georgia is locked in at number 2. I think that's a guarantee.
I would assume so, yeah.
First question. If Beck is out, how enticing is it now to play Georgia if you're like the 7 versus 10?
It's more enticing, but it's still because of Kirby and their defense and the way that they can win games around their quarterback as opposed to relying on him. I still don't sit there and go, oh yeah, I want to play the Georgia Bulldogs and Kirby Smart and all the talent they have. Like I'm still not itching to do that. I think whoever's
would you rather play Georgia without Beck or Arizona State? I think it might be Georgia without Beck.
I think it's still Arizona State. And I know they're raging hot on offense, and we know for a fact Jordan Tyson is done for the season.
Yeah,
I think I'd still rather play Arizona. And Arizona State's terrific. We'll get to them, but that's still Kirby and Georgia, and they can find ways to win. And if it's Gunnar Stockton, still have 3 weeks to prepare. And get him ready to go. I'm still not.
And he was a 4-star coming off last year. He's talented.
I'm not going to sit here and willingly say, oh, yeah, I'd rather play Georgia. We got him this time, because that's what we thought when Carson Beck got hurt last night. Oh, well, Texas, they have to win now.
Yeah.
Right? There's no way Carson Beck's out. There's no way they can't win now. And then Georgia finds a way, and just, the championship pedigree and the way that Kirby – you got to remember, he's a defensive coach. He's perfectly fine winning games like this. And for as ugly as it was, and it was ugly to watch – a win is a win.
Yeah.
And that's Georgia's mentality, and I think that's what it's going to be moving forward. I'm not – no, in a one-game scenario, I'm not trying to see Kirby Smart.
Okay, interesting. I'm still fascinated by this whole Carson Beck development and see how badly injured he was. Obviously, him playing at all.
It's kind of like the old Patriots thing where it's like, oh, do you want to play the Patriots in the playoffs this year? No, I don't.
I also thought it was crazy that Jaden Rashada was not the one to go in for that last play. They put in the one-armed Carson Beck over Jaden Rashada. I was a little surprised by that too. That was interesting.
Trusting your guys,
I guess, yeah. And then, all right, second question before we move on to the next game. Texas, what do you do with them now? Do they go to 5? Do they go to 6? Do they go to 7? Because they lost to Georgia. It was a great team, but you got to remember, they lost to a backup quarterback for the entire half, essentially.
I think they're going to look more so at the fact that the game went to overtime.
They keep them at 5?
They're going to be 5 or 6.
Yeah, I think
they might be below Notre Dame, maybe. Texas doesn't have a ton of super quality wins. A&M is probably the best win this season, right? I know the win at Michigan was impressive, but they were 7-5 eventually. I assume Texas is going to be 5 or 6.
Okay.
I think that's where we're going to end up.
And, of course, we will be reacting live to that in about 70 minutes is when the official college football playoff bracket is revealed. We'll be reacting live and see exactly where is Texas in the grand scheme of things and who Georgia will be playing in the quarterfinal round as well. So before we do that, though, we got to get to these other games. Let's get to the game that we are at, Dawn. That is number 1 Oregon beating number 3 Penn State 45-37 in an unexpected shootout. Honestly, if you told me it'd be a close game, I was like, oh yeah, it's gonna be like a 20-13 type of game. No, it was a shootout in this one. Let's go over the highest graded players, starting off with the Oregon Ducks, the only undefeated team left in college football, and will be the number 1 overall team going into the college football playoff. Tez Johnson was outstanding in this game with an 84.7 grade. Tight end Kenyon Sadiq, who had 2 touchdown catches, 81.1. Nico Reed, the cornerback, 80.8. Running back Noah Whittington, 69.9. Tatum Tuioti, the edge defender, 69.2. And then Dylan Gabriel had a really good game as well, 81.1 grade. Let's go over to Penn State with their highest graded players in this game. Kobe King, linebacker, 80.3. Cornerback A.J. Harris, 78.8. Tight end Tyler Warren, 78.4. Devon J. Thomas, the defensive tackle, 76.4. Katron Allen, who showed more juice, I think, than I've seen from him really ever, 76.1. And then Drew Aller with a 70.2 grade. Dalton, for you, the stat that told the story in this Oregon shootout victory.
Okay, first thing I want to do is credit Will Stein for calling just a spectacular game, one of the best play-called games I've seen all season. But I think where it starts, and on paper, Penn State was actually the better rushing team in this game. But if I focus just on Oregon's offense, they started out early in this game stressing the fact that they wanted to run outside, right? You could tell as the game went on, they wanted to run outside and then throw inside right back over the middle when those windows open. And I think a big stat for me is Oregon, 5.5 yards per carry on first down. And there's a couple of Dylan Gabriel runs that are mixed in there, but for the running back, 6.2 yards per carry on first down. Okay, and I think the way that they were able to get outside, control the edges, the outside zone run game, it opened up all those windows that Tej Johnson especially can work into, even the tight ends can work into at times. And Dylan Gabriel, I think, just got really comfortable throwing over the middle of the field. Those two things working in tandem, I thought, along with the tempo that Oregon played with, that controlled Penn State's defense. And that was part of what led Penn State's defense to struggle in this game. Run outside, throw over the middle, play with tempo. And I tell you all the time, you want to stop a great pass rush, a team like Penn State, run the football, play with tempo. You start wearing them out, right, in the front seven. And then you got linebackers, the thing chasing things east and west, and then you throw it right back over their inside shoulder, and Tej Johnson's flying down the middle of the field, right? I thought it was a spectacular game plan from Will Stein, and I want to go on the passing side of this too. Dylan Gabriel, and I'm going to get more on him, but over the middle third of the field, kind of an area I'm always talking about, right? 10 to 12, 182 yards, a touchdown, 89.6 passing grade. This was the idea. You could see it the whole way through. Run outside, throw inside, play with tempo, wear out Penn State, score 45 points.
Yeah, and really my set that goes into it as well was in the first half, Oregon scored on 71% of their drives. They scored on 6 out of 7 drives in the first half. They were going up and down the field. 5 out of 7 drives in the first half. 4 of those drives were touchdowns. They had 4 out of 7 drives in the first half, ended up being a touchdown. 31 points going into halftime. Dalton, my final score prediction was 31 to 20 or 30 to 24. It was 31-24 at halftime. So I would have gotten it right if it was 0-0 or been very close to getting it right if it was 0-0 the rest of the way. Obviously it wasn't, but Oregon just was going up and down the field in the first half. 284 yards for Oregon in the first half. They would have been on pace for well over 550 yards in the game if they kept up that pace. 0.26 EPA per play. They slowed down in the second half. They only scored 14 points after scoring 31 in the first half, but exploding for 31 in the first half is so hard for any team to match. Even one in Penn State, who I would argue this is the best we've ever seen Penn State's offense all year. They played an elite defense in Oregon, and they scored 37 points. This is the most points that Oregon has given up all year, even more than the Ohio State game. They only gave up, I think, 31 points in the Ohio State game. Penn State scored 37 in this game. You mentioned it, Will Stein. We actually haven't vote because we were in the press box. We had a vote for MVP of this game, and we both voted for Tej Johnson. But I typed in Will Stein hoping to find his name somewhere. I couldn't vote for him because Will Stein was the MVP of this game. He was masterful as the offensive coordinator. And listen, we saw another former Oregon offensive coordinator in Kenny Dillingham be unbelievable, and we'll talk about that game in a little bit at Arizona State. I think Will Stein is in line for a head coaching job very soon. He is doing an unreal job with this Oregon offense. He did a great job with Bo Nix last year. They had one of the best offenses in the country. I think they were second in EPA per play last year. This year as well, one of the best offenses in the country. They can score on anyone. Anyone. Doesn't matter if it's Ohio State. Doesn't matter if it's Penn State. Doesn't matter who it is. They can score on anyone. They can score on Michigan as well. I mean, that's a really good defense too. So they were getting east-west in the run game. And then, like you said, when Penn State attacked east-west, they went right down the middle. And that was a masterful game plan by him. And Tom Allen had difficulties out there. And really, Penn State's overall defense had difficulties out there. And I was really surprised that Penn State gave up that many points, 45 points, and Will Stein is a big reason for that, and the entire Oregon offense is a big reason for that.
Whoever their opponent is, and maybe especially if it's somebody, say, like Josh Heupel in Tennessee, I think the 2 times that we've seen Penn State live this season, we have seen them struggle with tempo. You remember when they got ahead of Ohio State 10-0 also. Chip Kelly got Ohio State back in that game because he picked up the pace. He got the ball to the perimeter because his offensive line was struggling. But it's a similar idea where you kind of work them east and west and you move at tempo. USC, I should mention too, in the first half of that game when, they were up 20-6 on Penn State at halftime. Tempo, get the ball in space, make them chase and make tackles in the open field. I think that's a theme, and I think when you're talking about if they have to play a fast-paced team like Tennessee, even if they have to play in Indiana likes to get up tempo and run their RPOs and do all that at a fast pace. I think that is an issue for Penn State's defense because when you get in tempo, one, you start wearing guys out, and two, can't get in all the fancy blitz packages, right? You can't. You just run it. You got to go four-man rush. You got to simplify the play calls. So I think this is something we could be looking at, and I need to look into more numbers on this for the whole season, but we have seen Penn State struggle in multiple games when teams pick up the pace on them, and Oregon went at a turbo pace for this entire game. Again, like you mentioned, Will Stein did a great job. This is something we're going to be looking for. I'm going to check more of the tape and the numbers on this exact thing because I think the pace, didn't you tell me, was it Kobe King throwing up on the goal line
Literally,
after one
first drive of the game, throwing on the goal line. Yeah.
They don't want to play at that pace on defense. It's a bigger team. It's a team that doesn't, they are athletic, but when offenses start speeding up on them, it is an issue. We've seen it twice in person now with the Ohio State game as well. So I think it's something matchup-wise that I'm curious to see who they're playing in this first round and if that's going to continue to be a trend.
Yeah, Will Stein, only 35 years old, by the way. I was looking into where he went to college because Kenny Dillingham went to college at Arizona State. So I was looking at what his alma mater is. He went to Louisville. So maybe if Jeff Brom ever gets a bigger job, I know Jeff Brom has a lot of ties to Louisville as well, but I don't know.
If I'm Louisville, I'm holding on to Jeff Brom.
Oh, I know. So am I.
I'm holding on to Jeff Brom for dear life.
I'm just saying if he ever leaves for whatever reason, Will Stein will be my first call probably. He is unbelievable. So let's get to the most impressive part of this game. Dawn, for you, what was the most impressive part?
I'll tell you what, we came into this season talking about there is no better quarterback to replace Bo Nix in this system than Dillon Gabriel, and this is the exact type of game we were getting at. He knew the assignment too. We're trying to run outside. We're trying to throw north and south. We're trying to run with tempo. Get rid of the ball quickly. 2.51 average time to throw. But I mean, just in general here, 22 of 32, 283 yards, 4 touchdowns. You know what's wild about it? No big time throws. An 85.8 passing grade with no big-time throws, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because we're getting the ball where we need to in an efficient manner. And I'll tell you what, getting rid of it quickly in the same way that Bo Nix would last year. Penn State, they blitzed on just about half his dropbacks, 17 out of 35. And he was terrific against the blitz. So they tried everything to get to Gabriel, and they just couldn't do it. And I think this is the game where we sit there and we finally not finally got it because he's had a spectacular year. He might be sitting in New York for the Heisman ceremony.
Yeah, I think he will after this game.
This is the moment where you go, this is why he was the perfect replacement for Bo Nix. It's efficient. It's accurate. We know what the game plan is. We get rid of the ball quickly. We do everything we do, or I should say everything we need to do to beat a defense and a pass rush like this. Dillon Gabriel was spectacular. He's been spectacular just about the entire season. Fully deserves to go at least to the Heisman ceremony. We both don't believe he should win it over either Hunter or Ginty, but if he's third, he's third. And I got no issue with that. He's put up a similar caliber season to what Bo Nix did last year in the same system, and he was a perfect replacement. And he's getting him in the portal is a primary reason they could win the national title. Yeah, absolutely. How about him in the biggest games this year as well, Don? 93.6 grade against Oregon State in the Civil War. Then he went out with an 87.6 grade against Ohio State in the biggest regular season game of the entire season, some would argue. Against Michigan, 90.3 grade. Against Washington, their rival that they just could never beat, 90.6 grade. And in this one, 86.8 passing grade. Terrific. Every big game down the stretch, he comes up massive. And I'll tell you what, the one thing I'm most encouraged by, and I think it was Oregon's biggest weakness earlier in the season, was they're finishing drives in the red zone. They had red zone offense issues earlier this season, and in this game, they had no such issues, and it's really been that way for the better part of 5 or 6 weeks. If that's patched up now completely, I think we just have to sit here and say, obviously undefeated, obviously number one in the country, polls, committees, whatever. Right now, they're the best team in the country. Yeah, and this I think we need to talk more about the fact that Oregon is the favorite to win a national title. Especially after what we saw from Georgia and Texas yesterday, what we've seen from Ohio State against Michigan. Oregon already beat Ohio State. Ohio State's going to have an extra game to play. Oregon should be the odds-on favorite right now to win a national title, and it's not bluster. It's not just because they're number one. They've earned it.
No, they have, and I think they're the best team in the country right now. I mean, you look at their roster. There's no glaring weakness. There is a glaring weakness for everyone else. Everyone else, you can point to one thing and say, "Hey, if they lose, because I know it's going to be because of that."
There was a point that I hit last year with Michigan where I just went, "This is the most complete team in the country. If you're going to beat them, it's going to take just an absolute."
You got to beat them. They're not going to lose.
It's going to take an incredible effort to beat them. It's going to be the same way with Oregon.
Absolutely. I'm going to go with his best receiver, and that is Tez Johnson, the 90.5 receiving grade in this game, the MVP of the Big Ten championship game. 11 of 12 of his targets, he caught them for 181 yards and a touchdown, 121 yards after the catch. Dalton, he averaged nearly 6.5 yards per route run. If you don't know, the best receivers in the NFL and college football are averaging like 3.5.
3.5, yep.
That's the bet. He's doubling up that in this game. He is small at 5'10", 165 pounds. But, man, he is a good football player, knows how to get open, knows how to win after the catch, even at that size. And he proved, and there's some people, I don't know who, but there are some people I've heard who said, now that Bo Nix, his adopted brother, is gone, how much he's going to be involved in the offense. Is that just a brotherly connection thing? Nah, he's a stud, man. He is a stud. Really cool story as well. Obviously, he gets adopted into the Bo Nix family, the Nix family. He wanted to go to Oregon. Oregon did not offer him out of high school. Bo said he had a Oregon sweatshirt that he would wear to high school all the time. Always wanted to go to Oregon, never got offered by them. Bo obviously went to Auburn. Tez had to go to Troy. Tez killed it at Troy. Tez was like legitimately one of the best receivers in the country at Troy. Bo, of course, transfers to Oregon. And then Tez gets offered at Oregon. And that wasn't just a feel-good story. They offered Tez Johnson because he's a star receiver. It wasn't like, oh, he's the adopted brother of the quarterback, bring it. No, he is a star receiver. And now Bo's in the NFL, and Tez is still a star receiver. I would take this guy in the NFL. I really would. I think that a lot of people are like, oh, he's 165 pounds. He's quite literally my size, 5'10", 165 pounds. I'm a little shorter. I might be 5'9", but I say I'm 5'10". I'm a hinge profile. But Tez Johnson, dude, he is so freaking good, and he's 165 pounds, and he's still so good after the catch. That's the crazy part. He's breaking tackles out there at 165 pounds against guys that are almost like 50 pounds heavier than him, honestly. And the defensive backs were 50 pounds heavier than him out there. So I love Tez Johnson, dude. He's a stud receiver, and I would be willing to spend maybe a day 2 pick on this guy in the NFL draft.
I think so. I think, look, if Tank Dell can get taken in the second round and be productive in the league, I don't think there's any reason Tez Johnson can't. Yeah. And as important as slot receivers are now, I think, look, the 2 best in the country this year were Xavier Restrepo and Tez Johnson, and I think they very easily could both go in the second round. I think they're 2 terrific football players, and I understand whatever limitations they have, but if they're just slot receivers, that's okay. Everyone's in 11 personnel now, and there's a role for those guys. So I'm with you. About probably late second, early third round, somewhere between 50 and 70 for Tez Johnson. I would have no issue with that. I get it. He's super talented.
Absolutely. So before we move on to the next game, I just want to shout out the Nittany Lions a little bit because I know we praised Oregon a lot for, and deservingly so, but Dawn, I said it when we were walking to the car. I said, listen, if Penn State lost this game 20-13, that's one thing. I actually feel better about losing this game 45-37 than I would about a 20-12 winner like that. Because now I think Penn State proved they can score. Like before, it was like, okay, you need the defense to carry you to victories. Now it's like, no, they just scored 37 points on one of the best defenses in college football. Andy Kolodnicki, this is his best game of the entire season, in my opinion. I thought he was outstanding in this game. Obviously, they came up just short, but Drew Aller had some huge throws in this game. I would argue he's QB3 in the NFL draft right now behind Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, whichever order you want to have them in. But I would argue Drew Aller is QB3. I was blown away by the Penn State offense, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for being in this game. If you told me Oregon was scoring 45 points on Penn State, I would have said Penn State loses this game by 24. And they ended up losing this game by a single possession because that offense was that freaking good yesterday.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They had a ton of balance, first of all. Allen and Singleton were spectacular in the run game. And I think when they have balance, and we've seen this before, we've seen it at Kansas with Andy Kolodnicki, when he has balance and he's got a two-way go, good luck. And Aller himself, they had a shot to tie this game late in the fourth quarter, and then the interception, obviously, in the go ball to Harrison Wallace. But if Aller's going to play like that, and Katron Allen's going to play like that, you've got a team that's a different type of dangerous because, you're right. That's what we thought is that a lot of games this year, elite defense, but scratching and clawing on offense.
Yeah.
if we can get into it, if we can get an offense in the playoff that's not just scratching and clawing, and they're running the ball like this and ours playing like this, now you talk about a sleeper to make some sort of run here. But that's what we need to see in the next game. Whoever they're playing in the next game, it's going to be another really good defense. They need the balance, and they need Aller to continue making big throws.
You can make the argument they lost by basically a touchdown to the two best teams in the country. In Ohio State and in Oregon. So they proved they can hang. They can hang with the big boys of college football. Also, again, I know people don't love hearing this, but it's a different playing field right now. Oregon and Ohio State NIL-wise is way above what Penn State got NIL-wise, and Penn State's still right there. So any of the James Franklin haters who want that guy fired, you're wrong. You're dead wrong. This is the right coach for Penn State. I truly, truly believe that. But Penn State came up just short in this one, and we'll see what happens in the playoff, though. I don't know where they're going to be in the playoff. Where would you put them?
I think
behind Texas and Notre Dame, but above Ohio State, or would you put Ohio State above them too because they beat them? That's a really interesting conversation.
Feels like that 7-8 pocket is where they sit, considering they came into this week number 3 in the way they played. I could 7 or 8. We'll see how the head-to-head plays out. But I think they're playing a home game.
And once again, we are now 54 minutes away from the official college football playoff bracket reveal. So we'll keep moving on through these games, but we are reacting live, which is why we're doing the show a little bit later than usual, not just to get some extra sleep, also to be live with you guys during the official college football playoff bracket reveal. Next game we're talking about, though, the ACC championship game. Number 17 Clemson clinching a college football playoff spot with a 34-31 win over number 8 SMU, setting up a nightmare conversation for the college football playoff committee between SMU and Alabama. We'll see how that shakes out very soon in the official 12-team bracket. Let's go over this game, though, starting off with the highest grade players with the Clemson Tigers. Bryant Wesco Jr., we'll talk about him a little bit later. True freshman wide receiver, 79.1 grade for the Tigers. Another true freshman, linebacker Sammy Brown, 76.6 grade. Edge defender T.J. Parker, 73.8. Barrett Carter, another linebacker, 71.4. Ashton Hampton, the corner, 70.7. And the quarterback Cade Klubnik with a 65.8 grade. Let's go over to SMU with their highest graded players in this loss. Ahmad Moses, 87.9 grade, the safety. Kobe Wilson, the linebacker, 78.8. Anthony Booker Jr., the defensive tackle, 76.8. Elijah Roberts, the edge defender, 76.5. Isaiah Nokobia, the safety, 73.3. And Kevin Jennings with a 71.6 grade. Dawn, for you, the stat that told the story of this game.
Okay, so a lot went wrong early. Pretty much everything went wrong early in the first quarter for SMU. In this game, you had a couple of turnovers, bad turnovers from Kevin Jennings. They weren't finding it on defense. They spotted Clemson a 21-7 lead. Everything went wrong in the first half. But if they make the playoff, especially, just getting back in this game is one accomplishment. If they make the playoff, I have to give Kevin Jennings a ton of credit. He was their highest graded offensive player. And in the second half of this game, and I'm sitting there in the third quarter watching this as we're also watching the Oregon game, and they're still kind of running the ball with Brashard Smith, and they're down a couple of scores. They're down 24-7. And I'm like, just let Kevin Jennings take all the swings he can. Just let him take the game over. And if he can't do it, you lose anyway because you lost in the first quarter. Just let him do it. Second half, he took this game over. 21-30, 212 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 big-time throw, 84.3 passing grade. Under pressure, clean pockets. Clemson sent a lot of heat at him. Jennings kept his composure. And this was another one where Rhett Lashley said, listen, guys, this first half, this was awful. This was probably the worst half of football we've played all season. Let's just come out, play one drive at a time, offense and defense, get one stop at a time. And I thought SMU's defense, they did a spectacular job just keeping them in this game because this is the type of game when it goes wrong like it did for SMU in the first quarter with all the mistakes and the turnovers and everything. In a conference title game, especially against a team like Clemson, this game easily could have been 49-10. They could have just rolled over after the first quarter and said, man, we blew it. We blew it in the first quarter, and that's it, and our season's over. Second half, Jennings was great. They battled. They battled to the absolute very end, and I'll tell you what, too. Clemson, responding after all of that with SMU tying the game in the last 20 seconds with the kick return, the Antonio Williams catch, and how about the Nolan Hauser kick?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
ridiculous.
Is that the biggest field goal we've seen all season?
I think it was, yeah.
56-yarder.
Send your team to the playoff, yeah.
When he had never kicked a game winner before, and his career long was 51.
Yeah.
And he hits a 56-yarder in that spot as a freshman.
To go to the playoff, yeah.
To go to the playoff. That's the kick of the season. But I just have to give credit to Kevin Jennings because even in a losing effort, I think we agree. Most people are on this now. SMU should be in the playoff. The two losses are by a field goal to BYU, who's going to finish in the top 15, 18, and Clemson, who, I mean, they won the ACC now, and they're going to be the 4th seed. Oh, no, they might not be the 4th seed. They'll be in the top 12.
Yeah.
They'll be a playoff team, obviously.
They'll be 11 or 12, depending on what they do with SMU.
SMU should be in. That's where I'm sitting on this. I think that's where a lot of people are sitting on this, and it's because, if nothing else, Kevin Jennings carried them all the way back to a tie game with 19 seconds left, I think, was on the clock when they scored that touchdown with Roger Daniel. I mean, just they kept themselves in this thing, and you have to give them so much credit for battling back in this. Even though they didn't end up with the end result they wanted and winning the conference, they should still be in the playoff, and it's because of the way Kevin Jennings played in the second half.
If they were, so it was 24-7 at halftime. If they lost by 17,
they're not getting it.
They're not getting in.
And I'll tell you what, it's really symbolic too of the way Kevin Jennings' season went. Right? First half in this game, first quarter especially, couple bad turnovers. We're doubting him. We're like, oh man, is this where it's going to be finally Kevin Jennings falls apart? Earlier in the season, you remember their first 3-4 games, the BYU loss. Why aren't they starting Preston Stone? What's the deal here? And then they turn to Jennings, and they get on fire, and they get themselves, we think, into the playoffs. I mean, it's symbolic of their whole season, and we got to give Rhett Lashley a lot of credit too, because that's a gutsy move after the year Preston Stone had last year before he got hurt.
Yeah. To
turn to Jennings and go, all right, it's all yours. First year in the ACC, let's go. You got it. And he carried them this far. And I know they didn't get a win in this game, but they played like champions, especially in the second half.
Yeah, we'll get into the playoff conversation. I think it's a fascinating one after we get through these numbers. But I'll go with SMU in the first half, negative .311 EPA per play is the reason why they just weren't able to come back in the second half. I mean, because they really were that bad in the first half. They outscored Clemson in the second half 24-10, but like I said, they were down 24-7 at halftime. In the first half, they averaged 4.5 yards per play, 4.4 yards per pass in the first half. 2 turnovers in the first half, like you mentioned. Kevin Jennings had a 51.4 passing grade in the first half with 2 turnover-worthy plays. They only scored on 12.5% of their possessions in the first half, Dalton. I mentioned before how Oregon scored on 71% of their possessions in the first half. SMU, 12.5% in the first half. SMU just kept shooting themselves in the foot in the first half, and give Clemson credit, they took advantage in that first half as well, defensively and offensively, and built up too big of a lead for SMU to come back from.
Absolutely. I believe they scored on both of those turnovers I mentioned, and
yeah,
that's what a team like that is going to do. We know there's still Clemson and still Dabo Swinney, and they still have a lot of talent. You make mistakes against a team like that, they're going to take advantage, and that's exactly what they did. In SMU, they dug themselves a little bit too big of a hole, tied the game again in the last 20 seconds, but that's really the reason they lost this game, is because the way they played, especially in the first quarter.
What's the most impressive part of this game for you?
I'll tell you what. It feels like we talk about this guy every time we do a Clemson game. TJ Parker off the edge is a monster. 73.8 overall grade in this game. 7 pressures. This strip sack of Jennings in the first quarter that really turned it upside down early. 5 defensive stops. This season, 87.7 overall grade, 14th among all edge defenders, and 49 pressures is 11th. TJ, true sophomore, is that correct?
Yes.
TJ Parker. This is a guy we're going to talk about first-round stuff next year.
And we need those guys. Because 2026 NFL draft does not look great right now. We need the guys, and I think TJ Parker's the guy for next year.
I want to just credit the Clemson defensive coaching staff, because something I noticed last night and then had to go back the last 4 weeks. You know what we finally did, too? That's not a TJ Parker thing. We finally moved Peter Woods back inside.
Thank God.
The last 4 games, the last 4 games he's moved back inside, and Clemson's played maybe their back-to-back their 4 best defensive games of the season.
Shocking.
Putting guys in
the best, one of the best D tackles in the country.
Putting guys in the right spot is a hell of a thing. You're set on the edge with Parker.
Yeah.
Leave Woods inside, and you'll be just fine. It's something I had to look into, because I noticed it last night when I was watching. I was like, oh, he's finally back where he's supposed to.
Yeah, 320-pound edge defender was always ridiculous.
Right. So credit to the Clemson's coaching staff for doing the right thing with Peter Woods as well. But TJ Parker's a beast, and we're going to talk about him a lot next year.
And if they leave Peter Woods on the inside, Clemson could have 2 first-round defensive linemen next year, and TJ Parker and
Sammy Brown at linebacker.
Sammy Brown.
They got some young kids. Avion Terrell's coming back.
Yep.
Right? I mean,
that's another first-round potential player.
This defense took a half a step back this year. They're going to be back next year.
Oh, they're nasty.
They just need to continue to build some consistency offensively.
And speaking of young players, I'm going with Bryant Wesco Jr., the true freshman receiver, outstanding for Clemson in this victory. He caught 8 of his 11 targets for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns with 67 yards after the catch. He caught 2 of 3 contested targets as well. And Dalton, this freshman receiver class is outrageous. I mean, you got guys like Jeremiah Smith, who's an alien. You got guys like Ryan Williams, who's a superstar already. You got Cam Coleman, who's starting to really emerge for Auburn as well. You got superstars. And so it's so easy to forget about the other guys that are true freshman receivers. Bryant Wesco Jr. has been great for them this year. Right now, he's second on the team in receiving yards as just a true freshman. And for a team like Clemson, they used to be, before like LSU and Ohio State really took over, Clemson for a lot of people was wide receiver U, right? They got Sammy Watkins, they got DeAndre Hopkins, they got a bunch of other guys. T. Higgins, right. T. Higgins, a bunch of other guys that have been in the NFL as well that have been good players. And then they fell off a cliff. Then they had nobody at wide receiver. And then all of a sudden they became like a Penn State in Georgia, where it's like, dude, you need something at wide receiver for the love of God. They got something now, because now Bryant Wesco Jr. has really played well all season. And in the biggest game of the year, he was by far their best weapon. So Bryant Wesco Jr., I want to shout him out because he was outstanding, and I don't want him to get forgotten about in what's been an unreal year for true freshman wide receivers. Bryant Wesco Jr. should not be forgotten about because he's also having a terrific year.
Sure is, and I want to shout out Antonio Williams, too. He's been really good down the stretch as well. He's made a lot of big plays for him, and the big completion at the end that set up the game-winning field goal. Those two guys, their emergence makes Clemson's passing game a threat in this playoff for sure.
Absolutely. Antonio Williams only a junior as well, so he might be able to come back for another year. And him and Brian Wesco Jr., that could be a dangerous team. If Kate Klubnik comes back again, like that could be really interesting how Clemson.
And we know they kind of keep it's kind of static with their roster year over year, right? They don't get a whole lot of transfers.
They don't believe in the transfer portal.
And a whole lot. There's not many guys that leave either. We'll say that.
Right.
Dabo keeps those guys in there. I mean, with the amount of talent they have coming back, it sure feels like they should probably be the ACC favorite because they weren't supposed to win it this year.
They're going to be I would bet they're going to be a top 10 team for us in our way too early ranking.
Yeah,
going into next
probably because next year's team sure looks like a year older with all these young kids. They're gonna be even better.
So I want to get to quickly the SMU conversation because Clemson's obviously in now. SMU against Alabama is the one that everyone's talking about right now. SMU, I believe, is the betting favorite to get in according to a bunch of sports books. So I think SMU will get in at the end of the day. I think this is my take on it, Dalton. In a vacuum, I would understand the argument saying Alabama's resume in a vacuum is better than SMU's. In a vacuum. If you just say, hey, take out the fact that they played in a conference title game, you take SMU's 13 games, and you take Alabama's 12 games. I can understand the argument for Alabama's 12 games. What I will agree with you, though, SMU should get in because if you do not put the Mustangs in, you set a precedent that, hey, we can punish you for conference title games severely. Like SMU, if they did not play in this game, they were above Alabama to begin with. And now if you take them out, you're saying, hey, because you played in the conference title game and you lost, you're out. I'm worried that if you do this, right? Lashley even said it on an interview, I believe it on 3. He said in the interview, hey, if we get left out after losing, I know for a fact there are a lot of coaches that have told me we will be opting out of conference title
Lane
games.
Kiffin said this a few weeks ago. He's like, what is the motivation then?
Right.
What's
and if you do that, you ruin conference title weekend. You ruin it. And then all of a sudden if enough teams opt out of conference title weekend, guess what they're going to do? They're going to cancel conference championships. Do you really want that? I think this is such a dangerous precedent that you're setting here if you leave SMU out.
It's not just that. It's this idea, if Alabama were to get in over them, that the only thing that matters is wins and your quality of wins, right? Without the losses being a factor.
Right. They had horrible losses.
The losses have to be a factor.
Yeah.
That Oklahoma game was Alabama's worst game in 20 years.
Yeah.
That's the worst game they played in 20 years. It's not – look, my answer to if, obviously Alabama fans will be upset if it's SMU over them. My answer will be beat Oklahoma and Vandy, and we wouldn't have this conversation.
Right.
If Alabama was 11-1, first of all, they'd be in the SEC title game anyway.
Yeah.
But don't play like that against Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I don't even think the precedent it would be a bad precedent. It would be a horrible precedent to set.
I think it would affect future years for sure.
But the idea that Alabama is like without flaws and just because they beat Georgia and they have big wins, and also this thing, it's not like they played anybody out of conference. They played Wisconsin and
also that's my favorite.
They played Wisconsin and USF.
These people, the Alabama thing is like, okay, well you put SMU and then all of a sudden you're saying, well, let's just schedule BS out of conference games. It's like, dude, Alabama's losses were all in conference. Like, what are we talking? It's not like they lost like a difficult out of conference game. Like, that's not even part of the equation.
They played Wisconsin and USF out of conference. Yeah, but they struggled with USF.
But everyone is making that argument saying, oh, well, let's just – also – SMU played a much harder out-of-conference game in BYU than Alabama did.
Well, they played BYU and they played TCU.
Right.
Who's at least decent.
Right. So it's like, why are we talking about out-of-conference games? That has nothing to do with this at all. And so I'm like, what are we talking about with that? That makes no sense at all. But
you can't just have it where, this team won 9 games and these were the 9 wins.
No, the losses matter.
Losing matters.
Yeah.
And I understand trying to look at a team's ceiling, and there's probably people that say, okay, Alabama's ceiling is higher than SMU's. I would even agree with that. Sure. When they've played their best, they've looked fantastic. But those things matter. Losing to 2 6-6 teams, and one of them, look, let's be real. The Vandy loss, even though the score was tight, they had the ball for 18 minutes. Their defense got dominated in that game, and the Oklahoma game, again, was the worst game they've played in 20 years. That has to matter.
Yeah.
And losing to Tennessee, another playoff team, I mean, these things have to matter. Your losses have to matter.
Yeah.
It's just, that's the thing. Like, they're 9-3 for a reason. They're not just they racked up 9 wins. We can't ignore the 3 games they lost. So, no, I think SMU should be in on merit. You mentioned the 2 losses were extremely close to 2 top 20 teams. They went 11-1 in the regular season, and I was of the belief the whole time they should have been in regardless of whether they won or lost.
Yeah.
And the fact that we were at halftime thinking about a blowout could knock them out, I don't think that should have been the case anyway, but that's the thinking we have, especially with what we saw with the ACC last year with Florida State. I'm sure the ACC is particularly traumatized with all of this.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're sitting there on pins and needles right now going, boy, it's really – I mean, that's the other precedent is
ACC, you're essentially a group of 5 if you do that.
Right.
Like
and the SEC, we're just trying to shoehorn a 4th team in there because that's the way we want the math to work.
I care about the future of college football a lot, and I just know if they do this, there will be teams opting out of conference title games.
Oh, yeah.
And that would fucking suck for college football.
Yeah.
That would suck for college football if you do that. So I don't think it's worth it to do it. So yeah, we both think SMU should get in. We'll see very, very soon in about 38 minutes now what the college football playoff bracket will be. All right, let's get to the next game, the Big 12 championship game. Number 15 Arizona State dominating number 16 Iowa State. 45-19. Dalton, my brother Ben, who was in the car with us driving up and driving back in the car, he's actually in the studio back there with the producers. He showed me a stat on his phone. Arizona State scored 6 touchdowns yesterday. Obviously, this game was played in AT&T Stadium, Cowboy Stadium. The Dallas Cowboys have scored 5 touchdowns in AT&T Stadium all year. Arizona State had more touchdowns in that stadium than the Dallas Cowboys have in their own home stadium all season. That's not my stat that tells the story. It could have been, but that is a ridiculous stat that Ben showed me in the car.
That's a fun one, and if I'm correct, I think it's the same number of wins in that stadium too, right?
Oh, God.
Haven't the Cowboys? They only have. I'm looking at it now. Don't they only have the Giants win on Thanksgiving?
It might be
as their only home win.
Ben's a huge Cowboy fan too. We're shitting on his favorite team right now, but
he's the one who brought it up.
It's been that kind of year. It's his own damn fault. Yeah.
The Cowboys have one home win this year in that stadium, and Arizona State matched that. Yeah, that's all right. Well. Anyway, back to the
bring that set up tomorrow on the PFF NFL show. Dallas, who do they play today? Do they have a game today?
I forget who it is. I lose track of all these things.
There you go. All right, well, they play tomorrow with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, they're playing the Bengals. Right. There you go, Eli.
All right, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later. But let's get to the highest graded player, starting off with the Arizona State Sun Devils. Cam Scatterbo, of course, the highest graded player, 88.8 grade, the self-declared best running back in the country. We'll probably get to another guy that has a case to be that after this game. But Cam Scatterbo is terrific in his own right, 88.8. Jeff Clark, defensive tackle, 82.5. Caleb Bacola, 72.7. Melquan Stovall, the wide receiver, 71.3. CJ Fight, 70.4. And Sam Levitt, 74.1, the quarterback. Let's go over to Iowa State, the Cyclones. Their highest grade players, Jalen Travis, the offensive tackle, 78.2. Dominique Orange, the defensive tackle, 76.6. Jaden Higgins, 73.2, the wide receiver. Miles Purchase, the corner, 69.1. Carson Hansen, the running back, 67.1. And how about Rocco Becht? He was actually the highest grade player for the Cyclones with an 88.7 grade. Good for Rocco Becht to get back on track a little bit. Obviously, they're out of the playoff now, so it won't really matter besides the bowl game. But it was good to see him play a lot better in this one than he has in recent weeks.
But yeah, we can't sit here and say it's his fault. The one big mistake was the interception thrown off the back of an offensive lineman's helmet, and then everything kind of concaved from there. But no, I think Rocco is certainly not the reason they lost this game. Arizona State won this game because they were the more physical team, and their offense is just an absolute wagon right now. And for the second, I mean, they did this to Arizona last week, and they just made Iowa State look like Arizona. And my stat, the 8 drives when Sam Leavitt was on the field, because they were so good in this game, they could sit him down late in the game, 9.9 yards per play in the 8 drives that Sam Leavitt was on the field. 9.9 yards per play.
Jeez.
79 team offense grade on those 8 drives, 6 touchdowns, a field goal, and a punt. Every single one of those 8 drives, they got into Iowa State territory. 10 explosive plays. I mean, this offense, and the only shocking part to me was without Jordan Tyson.
Yeah.
Who was, for the last 6-7 weeks, the best receiver in the country. Jordan Tyson's out. We're worried about this game. We're thinking it's 50-50. Can they survive without Jordan Tyson? And it just, the wheel keeps turning. This offense and what Kenny Dillingham's got going, and how about the 4th down call early to switch up the momentum there, the 4th and 1 to get the play-action bomb over the top going. But, I mean, between Scadaboo as the engine, as good as Sam Leavitt's playing right now, they found other weapons in place of Jordan Tyson that got it done. Stovall and Xavier Guillory. This is a team that, as good as they're playing, I almost don't want a bye week. I almost want them to keep playing. If I'm Kenny Dillingham, I'm like, we're in a rhythm. Let's play tomorrow. I mean, I almost don't want. I don't want 3 weeks off. I don't want to wait till New Year's. Let's go. Let's keep it going while we have this momentum, because this is arguably the hottest offense in the country right now. The way that Levin and Scadaboo are playing, especially, it's just amazing what they've done the second half of the season. Again, the only loss they had recently was when Leavitt was out against Cincinnati. I mean, they are just one of the best stories of college football. Picked last in this conference in the preseason.
Yep.
3 wins each of the last 2 years. Program was a train wreck with all the recruiting violations and all the COVID violations, all that stuff. What Kenny Dillingham has done, again, we think probably Kurt Cignetti's going to win Coach of the Year.
Probably.
But, man, I think Kenny Dillingham might have an equal argument to that, considering the team that he had coming into the year and what he's done with them now.
Yeah, absolutely. My set story, though, is Iowa State. 21 missed tackles for Iowa State in this game. 5 more than any other game this season for the Cyclones. The Cyclones have had issues tackling all year. So they had 21 in this game. Their previous high was 16 in a game. Also, Dalton, is the most missed tackles in a Big 12 championship game since PFF began in 2014 for college. It was horrible for the Iowa State defense out there. Cam Scadaboo broke 12 missed tackles by himself. He broke 12 tackles by himself, 115 yards after contact. Sam Leavitt broke four tackles as well. Arizona State only had a 55.1 run blocking grade. They weren't really blocking that well, but 253 rushing yards, 190 of them came after contact. They could not tackle, especially Cam Scadaboo. They could not tackle Cam Scadaboo. There was like 3 runs in this game that he went like full Marshawn Lynch beast mode.
Refuses.
Insane, dude. I could not believe how he was not getting tackled by like 3 Iowa State defenders like hanging on his back, and he was still churning out 15 yards afterwards. So I said it before, the Iowa State front 7 is a problem. And it got ragdolled in this game by Arizona State's ball carriers, especially Cam Scadaboo, who was amazing, incredible in this game. But Iowa State missing as many tackles as they did, that told the story for me.
Yeah, no, he's the most impressive for me. He has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the heart and soul of this team. Kenny Dillingham has said it. I mean, for as many things as have gone right, and as many guys have developed, their defense got a lot better. Sam Leavitt in his first year as a starter was terrific. Jordan Tyson was great when he was healthy. Scadaboo's the heart and soul. And you know what? 18 touches, 208 yards, 3 touchdowns. Let's just wrap up the grades for the season real quick. 91.1 overall, 3rd among all running backs.
Yep.
91.8 rushing grade, 2nd behind Ashton Jeanty. 105 total forced missed tackles, leads the Power 4, 3rd in the nation. Of course, Ginty's one of the guys in front of him. You know, we kind of saw online and Twitter and stuff yesterday after this game that maybe Scadaboo should be the 4th guy going to New York for the Heisman ceremony. I don't hate it. I actually don't hate it. And I know, I've stumped for Shedeur Sanders, and there's a couple other guys, quarterbacks especially, in that mix, but if he were the 4th guy to go, if it was Hunter, Ginty, Gabriel, and Scadaboo, I don't think I would complain. If he was fourth for the year he's had rushing and receiving, he's incredible. The heart and soul of a team that was picked last to win the conference, and now they've gone and won the conference, and they're going to get a top 4 seed in the playoff. Just an incredible year. I think you have to love on a national stage yesterday. Everyone realized now this guy's a superstar.
Yeah.
And you tell you what, if they do win a playoff game or 2 or 3 or however many, he will be the main reason for it. He's an incredible football player.
And we said it in the preview. The engine of the offense has to be Chadwick. He's been the engine all year, and he was like the entire car.
The fact that he only did it on 18 touches.
Crazy, dude.
Because we thought maybe like, okay, this game's going to be tight. He might have to get 35, 40 touches, and he just blew him away on 18 touches.
Yeah.
He didn't break
That's all he needed to do.
He didn't break a sweat.
No, they kept showing on the sideline. He was just like sitting there.
He was
like,
just hanging out.
Yeah.
No, I mean, in one of these playoff games, he's going to get 35, 40 touches against a primetime team like that. I mean, just he's amazing. He was fun to watch last year when they were 3-9. I mean, he almost beat USC by himself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a talented guy who plays as hard as he possibly can, and that's what I love most about this Arizona State team. You put on the film, I don't know that there's another team in the country that plays with more effort than Arizona State. Yeah, you might even call them the least talented team in this 12-team playoff field, but I don't think anybody plays harder.
And you know where that comes from? It comes from the head coach, and it comes from Kenny Dillingham.
Always.
Kenny Dillingham, who is a maniac in himself. I love, dude. He's gonna pop like a vein one of these days. Like, he is always screaming, going up and down. I love Kenny Dillingham though, and he's my most impressive because Dalton. They entered the year. You mentioned it. They had 100-1 odds. 100-1 odds to win the Big 12 entering the year. Preseason win total of 4.5. They were coming off back-to-back 3-9 seasons. One of them was Kenny Dillingham's first year at Arizona State. And, of course, you want to give a coach more than just 1 year. But there was some talk saying, hey, if he's, again, terrible, do you, again, fire him and then go for another coach? And he proved, no, I'm the guy. I am the guy for this program. His alma mater as well. They are conference champions for the first time in 17 years, and they're going to the college football playoff. The Arizona State Sun Devils are going to the college football playoff because of Kenny Dillingham and because of just, like I said, the attitude that they play with right now. So
12-team playoff going to ruin the sport, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it sucks for the sport. Yeah, it's brutal. Yeah. But no, Kenny Dillingham, dude, like I said, he brings an attitude to the team. It's just infectious attitude, and I think that's really why the entire team is playing like this right now, is because they're playing for their head coach, and they all have that attitude. Hey, we're gonna come out there and we're gonna physically maul you. That's what we're gonna try to do out there. And when you have that kind of attitude, yeah, talent is great and all that, but if you have that attitude of I'm going to beat you, you're going to beat them a lot of times. And I think they have talent, obviously. Cam Scadaboo, I think, is the embodiment of that kind of thing where it's like, hey, even Trevor Sickmo saying, the tools-wise, he's not that great, but like the more Trevor watched him, I even saw Trevor, what did he tweet out last night? He's like, I get Cam Scadaboo on my team right now.
Somebody draft him, because he's to me, he's just, and even if he's not your number one running back in the NFL, he's a guy you just want on your roster.
And you know what? He's a guy that you know is going to give his all on special teams.
Everything.
That's
whatever. He's a football player.
Like, exactly. Yeah. He is that kind of guy, and Arizona State has an entire team full of those guys. They're saying, hey, I don't care if I'm the star player. I'm going to give my all on a field goal blocking unit. I'm going to give my all on that. That's what the Arizona State Sun Devils are right now, and that's why they're in the college football playoff. When nobody, and I mean nobody, thought Arizona State had even a prayer of being in the Big 12 title game, and now they just won the Big 12 title, and now they're going to the college football playoff because of this attitude that they have of, hey, we're going to kick your fucking ass every single time we go out there. That's why Arizona State's in the playoff right now.
It's an incredible story, and they're going to be a serious threat to whoever they play.
Yeah, and now with Clemson winning, like you said, they are going to get a first-round bye.
Yep.
In the college football playoff
Big
as
advantage.
well. So yeah, we won't talk about Arizona State for another 3 weeks, which we'll see if the hot streak continues 3 weeks from now. But of course, Arizona State is getting into the playoff, and they'll be playing as one of the final 8 teams in college football as well, when they weren't even the 8th best team in the Big 12 entering the year, which is an insane story. Let's go to Mountain West, though, a team that a lot of people thought was going to win the conference championship going into the year. Boise State beating UNLV, number 10 Boise State winning 21-3. Let's go over the highest graded player, starting off with the Broncos. Their highest graded player was Jeremiah Irby with a 79.4 grade. Ashton Ginty, of course, was also spectacular, 77.7. Mason Randolph, 72.9. Marco Notarini, 69.8, the linebacker. Sayi Oladipo with a 69.6 grade, and Maddox Madsen with a 64.9 grade. Let's go over to UNLV with their highest grade players in this loss, starting off with their running back, Greg Burrell, 83.5. Marshall McDuffie, linebacker, 79.1. Jackson Woodard, 74.8. Fisher K-Mac, 72.5. Jalen St. John, 68.5. And Haj Malik Williams really struggled out there with a 44.4 grade. Dawn, for you, these stats told the story.
That's that last guy you mentioned. It's Haj Malik Williams. And UNLV really needed to balance this thing out in the passing game, and they just couldn't do it. Boise State was geared up to stop Jaden Thomas and Williams in the run game that designed quarterback runs, which you mentioned were a focus coming into this game, weren't working, and when UNLV got behind and they needed Williams to save him with his arm, he just couldn't do it. A 39 passing grade. Well, it's not going to get it done really in any game, and it was a struggle out there in the cold against a Boise State defense that was ready to go 13-28, 110 yards, 4 turnover-worthy plays. And I think just as important, Williams took 6 sacks in this game. We charged 5 of them to him.
Yeah.
It just holding the ball too long, bailing on clean pockets.
He was getting happy feet in the pocket, it seemed
Boise blitzed him early, and then they started lining up guys, in that mug look and dropping them off. I mean, I thought Boise had Spencer Danielson came in with a terrific defensive game plan in this game. And the other thing, too, is, on top of the blitzing and the pressure, nothing downfield.
Yep.
Nothing. 2 for 15 Williams was on throws beyond 10 air yards. 2 for 15 with 4 turnover-worthy plays. Everything about Boise State's defense was stop the run on early downs and then just do everything we can to take away everything from Haj Malik Williams in the passing game. That's how you end up with a 39 passing grade. That's how you end up only scoring 7 points. Their ability on defense to just completely befuddle Williams was a huge reason they won this game.
And you mentioned they blitzed early, and they dropped back after that. Dawn, my set to tell story. UNLV averaged 3 yards per pass when there was not a blitz. He was seeing ghosts out there.
That's every bit of it.
Me, and Ben were watching the game, and we were all saying, "Dude, look at how he's breaking clean pockets. He's almost he feels like a blitz is coming when there's no blitz."
Yep.
He felt it's Sam Darnold seeing ghosts out there. He felt it
in the second half, especially. It was completely
they were in his head. Yeah,
Absolutely.
they were in his head. Absolutely. Yeah, Boise State on 25 of 28 dropbacks did not blitz. I think they only blitzed 3 times in this game, and it worked beautifully. When Haj Malik Williams, when there was not a blitz, 8 for 19, 58 yards, 1 pick, 34.2 passing grade, a 28 passer rating, 1 big-time throw, 3 turnover-worthy plays. And you mentioned it. They sacked him 6 times without even blitzing him at all because his pocket presence was a mess in that game. You mentioned 5 of the sacks were his fault. And then also something else, and that's not all Haj Malik Williams' fault, because they dropped back so much. UNLV's receivers, on all the sacks I was looking at, they had nobody open. It wasn't like he missed wide open receivers. They had nobody open.
3 times in a row now that we've seen in the last 2 years that Boise did a spectacular job holding down Ricky White.
Oh, yeah.
Who I think is one of the best receivers in the country. I really do. I think he's a spectacular player. I think he's a guy that would be pretty high on my draft radar, especially probably early day 3, somewhere in there. 3 times in a row, they've held Ricky White down, and I think it made a big, big difference.
Absolutely, yeah. 58.1 receiving grade for UNLV as a team. And they have a good receiving core, and Boise State was like, hey, we're going to drop back 7, 8 guys back there, and we'll see if Haj Malik Williams can beat it. And he wasn't able to beat it, and that's why they were able to completely shut down that UNLV offense and only allowed 7 points in this game against the Rebels. But Dalton, for you, the most impressive part of this Boise State win?
Tell you what, something we haven't talked about yet this year. Boise State's got a pair of terrific corners. Jeremiah Irby and Amarion McCoy in this game. Let me give the combined 16 targets at these 2 guys. 3 catches allowed for 33 yards. Irby, a 79.7 coverage grade, led the team, had a terrific interception, I believe, on a go ball. He had a pass breakup. McCoy had a pass breakup. This pair of corners that they have, this is a problem for opponents. They're really good, and they're really disciplined in the secondary. They sat back in this game, like you mentioned, at 2 for 15 that the secondary allowed to Haj Malik Williams, over 10 air yards. And I think the pass rush, they've gotten a lot of sacks this year. The coverage is underrated. This Boise State defense, I think, can cause you more problems. Actually, the other stat I just remembered I want to get into. Irby, into his coverage in this game, 0 passer rating. And McCoy into his coverage, 39.6, which is the equivalent of just spiking the ball into the ground.
Yeah.
And obviously a 0 passer rating, well, that'll do the job too.
Yeah, about as good as you can do.
These two corners, Jeremiah Irby and Amarion McCoy, they keep playing like this, and you got a problem. And Maddox Madsen, I got to give him his credit, too, on the offensive side. Second half wasn't great, got a little loose with the football, but in the first half, he was fantastic. How about that touchdown he threw early in the game to the corner, in the back corner of the end zone?
Beautiful.
That's one of the best throws I've seen all season.
Yeah.
I mean, Maddox Madsen playing the way he did in the first half of this game, because I really like that Boise State did go to some of the throwing on first down early in this game, like I was asking them to in the preview. And then this secondary on defense, if they're starting to wreck, because there was some people even around Boise that was concerned about their pass defense. They play like this, they can also win a playoff game. I don't care if they're a group of 5 or not. So this is a dangerous team, and obviously the number one reason they can win a playoff game is...
Yeah, for one final time, we're going to shout out Ashton Jitty before, of course, the Heisman ceremony coming out very soon. But he had one final game to state his case to Heisman voters, and he did that in this one. 209 rushing yards for Ashton Jitty against UNLV. 187 came after contact. He only had 22 rushing yards before contact in this game. 187 after contact. Also, of course, a touchdown as well. It was like a 70-yard touchdown he scored. It was a ridiculous run that Ashton Jitty scored right before halftime. And Dalton, we said it. It's like, dude, you never kneel. Going into halftime, never, ever kneel when you have Ashton Jitty. Just give him the ball. And just be like, hey, whatever happens, happens. And what happened was he scored a 70-yard touchdown.
He broke the game.
So
he broke the game open.
They could have knelt it, and they could say, hey, it's going to halftime. No.
At 14-0, UNLV feels like you have a shot.
Yeah.
At 21, after that, no.
Some people were like, oh, this is going to kneel and go to... No, give it Ashton to see what happens.
Realistically, this game was over at halftime.
70-yard touchdown he scored right there. 11 tackles he broke on the ground as well. So let's go over season-long stats now. 1,882 yards after contact on the season. That's 527 more than Jonathan Taylor's record. Over 500 yards after contact more than the previous record held by Jonathan Taylor. He also, Dalton, 222 more yards than any other running back in the country's rushing yards this year. 134 broken tackles. 30 more than Bijan Robinson's record. Dalton, he is shattering records held by superstar running backs in the NFL. Jonathan Taylor's having a rough year this year, but overall, a great running back in the NFL. Bijan Robinson, superstar in the NFL. 2 amazing running backs in the NFL have set these records in PFF college history, and Genty shattered them. Shattered them. Broke it by 500 yards for the yards after contact, and 30 more broken tackles than Bijan Robinson, and still has one more game, at least one more game.
132 yards away, right?
I think 132 away from the Barry Sanders record. So the Jonathan Taylor record shattered. Bijan Robinson record shattered. Now maybe the GOAT of all running backs in Barry Sanders, he's 132 yards away going into a playoff game. We'll see. That's going to be like, I mentioned before, it's like the Adrian Peterson. Remember when Adrian Peterson's going for the single season record?
He was 9 yards short.
9 yards. And he needed like 180 going into it.
If he would have, I remember if he would have scored on that last carry, he would have broke it. Yeah.
I remember it was just like, it was like 60. It might have been 6 yards short. It was like close.
Something, yeah, very, very close. Yeah. Enough that if it was like within the 10-yard line, and if he would have scored.
And nobody thought he could do it because going into it, he needed like 180, and he just kept breaking off runs. I wonder if it's like Ashton Jitty, just like, hey, it's 130. I know you got to win a playoff game.
Now. They're trying to win a ball game.
They're trying to win a ball game.
And if they're going to win, he's going to get at least that much anyway.
And tied for 6th all-time in rushing touchdowns with 29 on the season. And he's still going, obviously, as well. Listen, I'm going to say right now, this is one of the all-time Heisman races. Truly. There's no wrong answer for the Heisman Trophy.
I would, if I had a vote, I would lean Hunter, because I don't know that we'll ever see that again, and we've certainly never seen it before. But if Genty were to win it, cool. I'm not complaining.
And of course, producer Eli makes a lot of money if Genty wins it. So that's another thing too.
You're welcome.
He's taking us out to dinner. He said,
"Yeah,
if he does that." I don't think he said that, but we're doing it.
The one thing I just keep going back to when we talked to him last year, well before the season, and he said, I'm going to put up 2,500 total yards and 20 touchdowns this season. And we looked at him cross-eyed. We did.
We legit laughed at him.
We were like, "Wait, you're serious?" And
yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, that's yeah."
And he also ended saying, "I will be in New York for the Heisman ceremony." And we're like, "Hey, Boise State running back, yeah, good luck with that, pal."
And he's right now at over 2,600 total and 30 touchdowns.
30. He sold himself short. He legit sold himself short. Yeah.
I don't know where he'll get drafted, but in my head right now, I think he might be a top 5 talent in this draft.
And just to illustrate how ridiculous this Heisman race is, and there are a lot of people in the chat right now, Don, that are going to war over Hunter versus Genty right now. But looking at the previous Heisman winners, like Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, Devontae Smith, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, just like Derrick Henry, how many of those, like Hunter and Genty, would win in majority of those years? Either one of them.
A lot of them. Yeah, and in several of those years.
Like Joe Burrow is one that I'm like, okay, Burrow, maybe the greatest single-season quarterback year we've ever seen. But other than that, you can make an argument for any one of them. I think you can say Genty or Hunter would have won that year. That just shows you, hey, this is an all-time Heisman year. This is an all-time Heisman year. I hope people, I know you have your idea of, or you're thinking of who you think should win it. But at the same time, appreciate this, dude. This is an all-time year we're getting. And how cool is it, Dalton? How cool is it? This is an all-time Heisman race, and there's no quarterbacks. It's a wide receiver in a corner from Colorado, and it's a running back from Boise State, and it's still an all-time Heisman year.
And you will very likely get Dylan Gabriel third, I think. And there will be, of the 4 seats, if there's really going to be a movement for Scadaboo maybe to be sitting there fourth, only one quarterback out of the 4 spots. I kind of like mixing it up a little bit there. Was it 4 quarterbacks last year?
No, they threw Marvin Harrison Jr. in there for reasons. Okay. For lifetime achievement award, really.
Okay. When maybe it should have been Neighbors, but
yeah.
What are you going to do? But last year you knew it would be a quarterback.
And Harrison was outstanding.
To have a non-quarterback argument at all, especially between multiple of them,
and
great stuff.
And the fact that it's still like usually when it's 2 non-quarterbacks, like, oh, it's kind of a bad year for Heisman. No, this is an all-time year, legitimately. So I just appreciate this race. We might get a 30 for 30. I think they did a 30 for 30 on the Heisman race between Charles Woodson and Peyton Manning. We might get a Genty versus Hunter 30 for 30 later on.
It's terrific.
Because it is awesome what is going on with the Heisman Trophy this year. But Boise State now wins the Mountain West Championship, clinches a playoff spot. Not only that, clinches a first-round bye. Going into the 12-team playoff with the 4 first-round byes, we're like, all right, it's guaranteed to be the 4 conference champions from Power 4. Boise State, it's crazy what they did this year, and credit to them, and they were getting a first-round bye in the college football playoff. All right, we have about 14 minutes until probably when they're going to announce it. I know they take a little bit of time.
They'll take a little time if we want to speed through the rest of these.
Yeah, because these are obviously those matter for the playoff. These do not matter for playoff, but they deserve their own.
We get a 5-6 minute take on each of them. Why not, right?
Let's get to the AAC championship game. Number 24 Army beating Tulane 35-14. Let's go over the highest graded Black Knights in this game, starting off with Brady Small, their center, 83.4. Casey Larkin, their safety, 83.1. Kanye Udo, the running back, 75.8. Connor Funukane, the offensive tackle, with a 74.1. Andon Thomas, the linebacker, 72.7. And Bryson Daly, the quarterback, 72.6. Let's go over to the Tulane Green Wave with their highest grade players. Rashad Green, 77. Mario Williams, 75.9, PFF alum. Micah Robinson, cornerback, 75.3. Shader Hurst, 72.1. Bailey Dispani with a 71.6. And then Darian Mensah with a 50.6 grade in the loss for Tulane. 50.8, excuse me. Dawn, for you, the Seth Hill story, this really surprising blowout for Army.
Yeah, we'll make these a little quicker. I'll go through both things I have here, actually. Yep. So story of the game was Tulane made early mistakes, and Army got ahead, and this turned into an Army game. And what I was most impressed by was looking at the stats. Army did not have a single play that lost yardage in this game. Wow. Okay, and I just want to throw you some context with this because I love stats like this. I spent way too much time on this, I'll be honest with you. 19 times this season in college football has a team taken out kneel downs, obviously. 19 times where a team has finished a game with no negative plays on offense, okay? Army is the only team to have done it 3 times out of those 19, all right? Which, for their offense and what they're trying to accomplish, makes a lot of sense. I'm sure Jeff Munkin puts that on a board somewhere, no negative plays. Well, he did it 3 times this season. Only 2 other teams have done it twice, Kansas and New Mexico. Also teams that run the ball a lot, but it's kind of weird company, but Army, this you could tell with them it's a hallmark, right? The other thing, you also had no turnovers, which is a common thing for them this season. They're what, 12 and no, they're 11-1. They're 11-1 still to play their biggest game of the year next week. Not a single penalty either.
Yep.
You talk about discipline.
Yeah.
And I know it's Army. And
they didn't go backwards at all in this game. Yeah.
Nothing. They, outside of the Mario Williams touchdown right before halftime, and there was a possession in the first half when it was 4th and goal from the 5 they didn't get. Outside of those 2 plays, they did nothing wrong this entire game. Yeah. Literally nothing wrong this entire game. I mean, just incredible. But again, this is what they're built on. Bryson Daly runs through you. Kanye Udo runs right through you. It's not really actually true constant triple option football. They just whoop your ass. And that's why my most impressive, I'm going with the offensive line. Brady Small and those guys up front, 74 run blocking grade in this game. They have the highest overall grade and the highest run blocking grade in the country, this offensive line, this season. And I think something I love is the fact that they are a finalist for the Joe Moore Award.
Hell yeah.
Your 3 finalists are Texas, Oregon, Army, and Oregon's a little further down than those other 2 in the grading ranks and things like that. But I think Texas should win it. Honestly, they're last I checked before this week, they were 5th and Army was 1st, and Texas play an SEC schedule. They have all that talent. But I love the fact that this offensive line is at least a finalist for the Joe Moore Award because they have just dominated. Outside of the Notre Dame game, they've dominated.
They're kicking ass.
They just, I mean, at a different level. I believe, I think Army, they might have, I thought I saw something like they have the best run blocking grade as a team of anybody in the last 3 years or something. They've just run people over all year, and they execute at such a high level. What a terrific season. First, they haven't been in a conference for many years. They used to be in Conference USA for a handful of years. They never won that. How cool is it to see them storm the field, too, at West Point?
It was sick. Yeah, it makes you feel a lot better with the future of the country that, the Army is the most disciplined and best executing team out there. So
they sure are. I mean, no negative plays.
And to do not shocking at all.
To do it 3 times in 12 games is to not have a single play lose yardage. That's crazy.
It is not surprising at all. The team from West Point is the one that's the most disciplined team in college football. That's not surprising at all, considering what they go through in a day in, day out regimen outside of football, obviously, as well. But set the story, and I'll also go with my most surprised because it kind of goes into each other. Bryson Daly, 2 pass attempts. They threw the ball twice in this game and still blew out Tulane. They had
completed both, though.
You completed both, right, for 17 yards.
Still executing.
335 yards on the ground, 5.9 yards per carry, 11 explosive runs, which means 11 runs of 10-plus yards, 219 yards total on those explosive runs. They only broke 7 tackles in this game. So it wasn't like, Bryson Daly and Kanye Udo were just breaking tackles left, right. No, like you said, the O-line was dominating out there. They were just getting so many yards before contact. And really, Tulane from New Orleans, obviously a warmer weather city. You go up to West Point, it is cold in there. And when you're running the football like that, you're breaking the will of that team. And they broke the will of Tulane in this game. And obviously Bryson Daly as well, 126 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, 82 after contact, 5 yards per carry. Kanye Udo, 158 yards, touchdown, 118 yards, 5.9 yards after contact per carry. Dalton, Bryson Daly now is tied with Ashton Ginty for the most rushing touchdowns this year. It also means he's tied for 6th all-time for rushing touchdowns with 29 on the year. He needs 2 more rushing touchdowns to get the quarterback record. And the quarterback record is held by Keenan Reynolds from Navy.
Oh, of course.
And he plays Navy next week, the arch rival. How awesome would it be if he scored 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns to either tie the record or break the record held by an arch rival? I think that'd be really, really funny if they do that next week against Navy. And also, you could do it in the bowl game as well. He's going to break the record. I'd be surprised if he does not break the record at this point.
Yeah.
But
what a great game that's going to be next week, because Navy was really good this year, too. That's going to be maybe one of the best Army-Navy games we've seen in a while, as good as these 2 are.
Absolutely. Yeah, dominant O-line. You 2 great runners in Bryson Daly and Kanye Udo. This is what happens. You just break the will of another team. That's what Army did in this one, breaking the will of them and winning the American Championship, their first conference title in program history ever for Army, because obviously they've been independent for a very long time, so there's a little bit of context needed for that, but still, first conference title ever for the Army Black Knights. Hell of a year for them. All right, next game we're talking about is the Sun Belt Championship. Marshall killing Louisiana 31-3. Let's go over the highest grade players, starting off with the Thundering Herd. Josh Moten, the corner, 86.9. Tytron Chapman, 86.5. Mike Green, the edge defender, 78.8. Jaden Yates, 78.2. Ag McGee, the safety, 77.6. And then Braylon Braxton, 64.8. Let's go over to the Louisiana Raging Cajuns with their highest grade players, starting off with offensive guard A.J. Gilly, 70.9. Lander Burton, 67.1, the center. Jax Harrington, the guard, 67.1. Amir McDaniel, the corner, 66.8. Harvey Broussard, the wide receiver, 66.5. And then Daniel Beal, the quarterback, at the 39.1 grade in the loss for Louisiana. Dawn, for you, the stat total story.
Yeah, it's that last part. It's the fact that Chandler Fields started this game. He was already their backup, and with Ben Woldridge out with a collarbone injury, and he got hurt 17 snaps into it. That's really it. Fields played 17 snaps. The game, when he got hurt, was 7-3 Marshall. We had a good football game going, and obviously Marshall's got the best defense in the conference, and you really, without your starting quarterback, it's hard enough. With your backup in there, and Fields is a capable backup, he gets injured, and now you're turning to a true freshman third-string quarterback in Daniel Beal, and nothing against him at all. I mean, it's a tough assignment when you're playing a defense like this that Charles Huff has going. 9 for 24, 95 yards, and it just became this game where Marshall felt like on defense, there just wasn't any more threat from Louisiana. Once they lost their quarterback, they could key in on the run game. They have, a coverage unit that is tied for second in the nation in coverage grade. You see some of those guys in the secondary and their highest graded players. It's just a game for Louisiana where it all fell apart. And it ended up being, actually, I found a fun fact. I found this one. Louisiana, 55 team offense grade in this game. Their lowest since week 3 of 2018. They played Mississippi State that day. This is how long it's been. Jeffrey Simmons was on that team.
Oh, yeah.
Willie Gay was on that team. Cam Dantzler was on that team. There was several NFL players. I mean, and this is the type of offensive performance. And, again, it was a great season for Louisiana. They just kind of got undone here by quarterback injuries. And when you have a true freshman third stringer out there, it's tough. Against a defense like this, it's really, really rough.
And speaking of defense, Marshall will go quickly here because we are getting close to the college football playoff reveal, but 80-plus defensive grade, run defensive grade, and coverage grade. I mean, they only allowed 3.9 yards per play, only 9 first downs total in this game on 10 possessions. So Louisiana averaged less than 1 first down per possession. That's just obviously not going to get it done. 3 turnovers on downs, 55.4 offensive grade. Just could not get anything going offensively due to Marshall's strong defensive performance. So, Dalton, for you, the most impressive part of this Marshall win?
Take Josh Moten at corner. He's one of the best corners in the country this year, and if he's coming back for another year, he's going to be a guy for us to watch next year. 1 catch allowed in this game for 9 yards, had an interception and a pass breakup, and this season, 91 coverage grade, second in the FBS behind Jahdae Barron. 5 interceptions, 7 pass breakups, and like I mentioned, that whole Marshall secondary been great all season, tied for second in the nation, I believe, with Notre Dame. It's Texas and then Notre Dame and Marshall, second in the nation in coverage grade. So, I mean, they put together a spectacular defense. Best defense in the conference, a really underrated defense, the secondary. And you mentioned Mike Green up front, spectacular football player. They came on, they got hot late, and they rode this defense to a conference title.
I want to shout out another coach here, Charles Huff, who actually just reported, I think this morning, Brett McMurphy reported that he will be Southern Miss's new head coach. So the Marshall head coach going to Southern Miss. A lot of just reports out there that just, I don't know if Marshall wanted him back. I don't know if it was like a pay thing where they didn't want to pay him as much as he wanted either. It was just a weird thing, but want to shout him out because this was the last year of his contract at Marshall, and obviously he's leaving most likely to Southern Miss if Brett McMurphy's report is correct. But Marshall's first conference title in a decade. The last time they won a conference was back in 2014, and yeah, under Charles Huff, they don't have the ranked teams like they had under the previous coach in Doc Holliday, but still, they went 10-3 this year, Sun Belt title. I believe they went 9-4 last year as well. He had this program going in the right direction, and if it's true that he is going to Southern Miss, they got to find a new head coach, a good one too, because Charles Huff's a very, very good coach, and if it's true he's going there, Southern Miss got a hell of a coach for a program that desperately needs it right now.
Southern Miss has been struggling for a while, and that's always where it starts as your head coach, especially in college. So that'll be something worth monitoring in the Sun Belt. See if Southern Miss, because I tell you, they used to be a really darn good program, and they've fallen on hard times. Favre, They've fallen on hard times the last 10 years. Even when they had Larry Fedora as their head coach, They were great. Ever since Fedora left, it's gone downhill. So we'll see if Huff can fix that over at Southern Miss. But great job by the Thundering Herd, for sure. This was a season. I don't think they were a team that was really expected to be competing for the Sun Belt title, but when you have Louisiana and James Madison and Texas State and all these other teams, a great job that he did and that whole team did. Yeah, so if he is going to Southern Miss, it's a hell of a hire by Southern Miss, and we'll see what Marshall does head coach after that. But let's go to the MAC championship now. Another blowout game. Ohio killing Miami of Ohio, 38-3 in Ford Field. Let's go over the highest grade Bobcats in this game, starting off with Bradley Weaver, 89.6 grade. Tank Pierce in the corner, 83. Coleman Owen, the wide receiver, 77.3. Anthony Tyus, the third, 77. Dustin Johnson, the safety, 75. Parker Navarro, the quarterback, 78.9. Let's go over to Miami of Ohio with their defensive tackle, Savio Frazier, 76th grade. Linebacker Ty Wise, 74.6. Javon Tracy, wide receiver, 72.4. Safety Eli Coppus, 71.9. Rayon Strader, the quarterback, with a 67.5. And then Brent Gabbert, 48.3 grade in the loss for the Red Hawks. Don, for you, the stat told story. Sounds funny, but maybe the most shocking result of the whole weekend, because Miami, Ohio had been expected to win the conference all season after winning it last year, and they had beaten Ohio pretty soundly in their last 2 meetings. But Ohio came out from the jump, and they controlled this game. My stat, they had the ball for 37 minutes and 35 seconds. And on the ground, through the air, everywhere you can think of, Ohio controlled this game 3 drives in the first half, because it was really ball control. That's how the MAC works, right? It's run the ball, it's ball control. 3 drives in the first half, 39 plays, 230 yards. They had the ball for over 19 minutes, and they scored a touchdown on all 3. This game was 21-3 at halftime, and it was just done. It was just done. They had balanced 235 yards passing, 238 rushing. Since week 9, which is the week after they lost to Miami, Ohio, that was their last loss, the 13th highest graded offense in the country and the best one in the conference. There's a resurgence that happened after they lost to Miami, Ohio. They were determined to get their revenge, and they got it in this game. Credit to the Bobcats. Wasn't there a stat you mentioned? It's been some insanely long time since they won a conference.
Good call. What was it?
Didn't you say since like the 50s or
I think
something like that?
The 50s, yeah. Yeah, let me look up real quick.
I forget what you had, but I mean, just you talk about it really was a shocking result considering how good Miami, Ohio is. This is a really good football team, and Ohio just turned the tables on them completely.
It's been 56 years since Ohio has won a conference.
That's
hell of
incredible stuff. You're what is that? 1968, 69?
Yeah, 68.
I mean,
I'm doing quick math right now.
I would argue this was actually the most shocking result of the weekend. The way that this went.
That's actually insane that it's been that long. But yeah, Miami, Ohio, 3.9 yards per play, 129 yards total, 2.9 yards per carry, 5.1 per pass. Miami had a 70-plus run defense grade, pass rush grade, and coverage grade in this game. So that's why the offense is horrible. They scored 3 points. I don't need to go too much into that. But most impressive part, Dalton, for you in this game.
I'll take the defensive line. You control a game like this. You control it in the trenches. Bradley Weaver and those guys up front, 79.3 grade as a group, 62.1% pass rush win rate, especially when you're pinning your ears back and you're ahead all day. That helps, but also only allowed 2.9 yards per carry on the ground. Like you mentioned, dominant team-wide effort, as good as you could get for the Bobcats, and that's how you win. That's how you make a statement winning your first conference in 56 years. It's just the entire roster played well, but I'll shout out the defensive line, especially in the MAC. You got to win in the trenches. That's what they did.
Yep, and I'm going with the run game, too. You got to win with the run game in the MAC as well. Anthony Tyus, the third, the running back, 151 rushing yards, 80 yards after contact with a touchdown. Parker Navarro, the quarterback, 86.1 rushing grade, 73 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 53 yards after contact. He broke a tackle on 50% as well. Navarro only had a 60.8 passing grade, but it really didn't even matter. But the Bobcats, defensively, like you just mentioned, offensively, they're the more physical team in this game, and they dominated Miami of Ohio in that one. All right, we're in the playoff selection show right now, but they're going to probably take a few minutes before they actually get to the real bracket. We'll quickly go through the final game that we're talking about today. That is the Sun Belt Conference USA Championship between Jacksonville State killing Western Kentucky 52-12 on Friday night. It was a slaughter from Jacksonville State. I'll talk about that in just a second, but let's go over the highest grade players, starting off with the Gamecocks with Cam Fawn, 85 grade, Trey Stewart, the running back, 78.5, Antonio Carter, the second, 75.1, Cam Jones, 74.4, Derek Carter, 74.2, and then Tyler Huff, 87.2 grade for the guy who's been playing maybe on a bum ankle as well in that game.
Maybe not. Rich Rodriguez, you devil, you. I mean, telling us this guy is a game-time decision, then he goes out there and has like his best game of the season. Yeah, okay. There's no way he didn't talk to Kyle Whittingham sometime during the week, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's no way. This was
how do you play poker with
the ultimate,
the two best poker players in college football.
All week. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think he'll be a game-time decision. If he knew he was going to play like this wasn't a decision.
Oh, no, there was no decision. He was playing. Yeah,
Tyler Huff was just fine.
Let's go over the highest graded Hilltoppers in this game. Stacey Wilkins, offensive tackle, 72.2. Upton Stout, the corner, 72. Sebastian Benjamin, 71.3. The edge defender, Hosea Wheeler with a 70.9 graded D tackle. Easton Messer, 67.8. And Caden Velkamp with a 62.1 graded quarterback. Dawn, the whole story in this game.
How about 14 explosive runs, which when I looked it up, I think was the 7th most by any team this season. I mean, just ridiculous on the ground what they did. 386 rushing yards and a clinic when I was watching the tape on this game. An absolute clinic in modern option football, all right? 24 plays with a read option on, all right? 221 rushing yards on those plays with 8 explosives. Just everything from the option game to, Stewart and Huff both, and the influence with counters and pulling guards and just everything you could think of in the run game that could possibly go right and as well executed as it was. That's what Jacksonville State did. Most impressive, real quick, Tyler Huff. I mean, apparently went from game-time decision to maybe arguably the best quarterback of the week. Had his second highest graded game of the season at 87.2, 11 of 15, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 big-time throws, 167 yards on the ground, and they just apparently were just playing possum, losing to Western Kentucky by a couple points last week, and Tyler Huff gets hurt and he doesn't play most of the second half. They just, I'll tell you, we were here to find out who the best team in Conference USA was, and they left absolutely no doubt, especially on the ground. And the only other thing I have is is it Rich Rod's last game in Jacksonville?
God, I hope so. as a Penn State fan, God, I hope so. I really do hope so, because I am nervous about Andy Kolnicki, because apparently Rich Rod's a finalist for West Virginia job, and Andy Kolnicki's a finalist for West Virginia job. I hope so.
If we get Rich Rod back, we get Scott Frost back at UCF.
And Rich Rod back at West Virginia.
We could get Rich Rod back at West Virginia. How fun is that?
I'll talk about him in just a second. He actually is my most impressive part, but the stat to the story is just what you said. Really, the stat to the story, Tyler Huff played in this game. That's the stat.
Pretty much.
That's the stat to the story. He played in this game. The reason why we picked Western Kentucky, both of us, Dalton, is because we thought there's a chance Tyler Huff would not play. And if he didn't play...
We got to put him on the Kyle Whittingham list.
We do.
I'm not listening to a word Rich Rodriguez says anymore during the week.
Jacksonville State averaged 3.4 yards before contact, 3.5 yards after contact in this game. They dominated on the ground. They imposed their will in the run game. .363 EPA per run, 386 yards on the ground. 201 came from Trey Stewart, the running back, with 108 after contact. All about the Gamecocks run game. With a healthy Tyler Huff, they were dominant in this one against Western Kentucky. And then Rich Rod, my most impressive part. Conference USA champs in only their second season as an FBS program. Back-to-back 9-4 years for Jacksonville State in their first 2 years at the FBS level. Again, the reason why I'm maybe saying most impressive here is I want to shout him out just to continue to say, hey, West Virginia, please hire him. Don't poach my offensive coordinator.
Max is very nervous, especially after the game Andy called last night.
Exactly, yeah. West Virginia is probably feeling really good about their finalists after what happened this weekend. But he coached at West Virginia, obviously, from 2001 to 2007. Has not been at the Power 4 level since he was at Arizona back in 2017. So he's done an amazing job with the Gamecocks, and they've made the transition to the FBS look seamless, and they look like a perennial contender in the Conference USA right now, the way they're playing. Their first 2 years in the FBS, they have a conference title already, and back-to-back 9-4 years.
Yeah,
hell of a year.
For sure. And the only question mark is it's going to be entirely possible, obviously, that they have to find a new head coach. So
that's true.
We'll see where that goes. And I'll tell you, interesting year in Conference USA, because we thought Liberty was probably still the odds-on favorite. Now it's kind of a wide-open conference. You look now, Caden Salter's in the portal.
Right.
And, I mean, it was a wide-open conference all season, especially. You knew it would get weird when Kennesaw State beat Liberty, because everything in Conference USA has been weird the last couple of years. But, no, a great year for Rodriguez at Jacksonville State, and a great year for their team. And just, you mentioned it, to get a conference title in your second year of the FBS.
It is crazy. That's insane. All right. So that wraps up all of our reviews for the conference title games, Dawn. Now we have the official college football playoff live show going on right now. So we're keeping an eye on that. They still have not released the bracket, so obviously we're not behind on anything like that. We will be reacting live to the official bracket when it comes out, but obviously a lot of storylines going into this college football playoff, right? What happens to SMU? What happens to Alabama? Do they kick out SMU for losing conference title game? Do they put in Alabama for it? We already broke that down in itself. What is the next thing that you're really interested in seeing with this new bracket reveal?
I think it's the jumble at 5 through 9, and I think the 5 teams we're talking about are Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, Texas, Tennessee. Those 5 teams. Which one of the 5 is going to be going on the road?
I think Tennessee. I would be floored if it's not Tennessee.
Probably, considering they came in at number 9 or somewhere around there, but I still think, I almost wonder if they put Tennessee and even Texas side by side, or some Penn State, some of these resumes side by side, and mix it up a little bit and go, you know what? Maybe this thing, because Penn State, what's Penn State's best win this year? This is kind of the problem.
Their best win this year, Illinois.
Okay, and they're going to finish the year ranked. I mean, that'll be the question. I think it'll be Tennessee, and then you talk about matchups too. When you talk about the order of 5 through 9, especially 5 through 8, if it's not going to be Tennessee playing at home, the other 4 are playing at home, what kind of matchups do we get, right? As far as the style, first of all, who's number 5? Okay, and I think actually it starts with which order is 3 and 4 in? Because we saw some movement yesterday online of people saying, you know what, even if they both get byes, should Arizona State be 3 ahead of Boise at 4?
I don't think so, but there's a lot of chatter about it.
Big 12 schedule, dominant end of the season, did what you did to Iowa State. And I know, again, Boise, they were up there at, number 10 or 11 in the actual rankings, which puts them obviously in the top 4. But, everybody talking about the 5 seed being the spot to be. Do you really want to play Arizona State right now?
Yeah.
And you really think that's a gimme? I think that's something we got to get out of our heads. Like, any of these teams that made it this far can win a football game, right? I don't think it's that crazy. And then if you're the 5 seed also, I don't know if it'll be Bama. I don't know if it'll be SMU. It could be Clemson at the 12.
Which is it's so funny.
There's no cakewalks here.
No.
And if you're playing Boise and you think, oh, we're playing the Group of 5 team, one of the best college backs of all time is sitting over there, and you got to go and stop him. So I think the 5 through 8 order and who's going to get there, that's the next thing beyond the last team in that's fascinating to me, especially with some of the home environments they're going to be playing in.
So the scenario that's always it's a little funny to me when you're debating SMU versus Alabama is it's like if you put Alabama in, I would imagine it would be Alabama 11, Clemson 12, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And then
it should be.
And then the other way, though, it would be Clemson 11, SMU 12.
I think.
Right?
I think.
Which is like, it's funny that
They lean on head-to-head a lot, clearly. But the body of work still might say SMU should be ahead of them. Now, do I think it really makes a huge difference?
I just think it's funny that we're debating Alabama versus SMU. We're just like, I don't know. That's why it's weird, because it feels like Alabama would be above SMU by that logic.
If SMU was number 8 going into this week, and they lost the game like that. Yeah. I mean, realistic. And again, we have seen major inconsistency when it comes to when teams lose, how far they drop. Look how far Miami dropped, losing a nail-biter to Syracuse, versus Ohio State losing to 7-5 Michigan and scoring 10 points. Right? I mean, it has been inconsistent on this front of where teams drop after losses, and in some cases it feels like, do the losses even matter? Mm-hmm. Like the Alabama thing, that's again the thing to me. Do the losses to a 6-6 Vandy and a horrible loss to 6-6 Oklahoma, why does it feel like some teams' losses matter? Because this is the argument that any Miami proponent is making, is going, both of our losses, we think Georgia Tech and Syracuse are better than those two teams you played, and we played them both to the wire. Yeah, and you got kind of dominated certainly in one, and I would argue kind of dominated in the Vandy game too, at least defensively. So I just that last, there's always going to be an argument. We could put 64 teams in this field because they do it in college basketball, or 68, and they argue about the last 2 or 3 teams in anyway. This is always going to happen. But I do think, along with your ceiling, the games you lost, they do have to matter. And the SMU thing. I go BYU by 3 points, top 20 team in the country. Clemson by 3 points, top 15 team in the country. Especially the way the game went last night. I don't see any reason it shouldn't be SMU.
Yeah, I agree.
Give them a shot. In the conference and strength is. I'm so sick of strength of schedule too. I want to know the numbers that come behind this, because it feels really subjective at times when they bring up just at random points strength of schedule. And I get the SEC.
The strength of schedule metrics.
I completely get the SEC is the deepest conference. I'm aware of this. But you have, again, Ole Miss lost to Kentucky and Alabama lost badly to Oklahoma. And it's not like they lost to all the top teams beating each other up. There was some of that, sure, but it wasn't all of that. And I'm sorry. Like, if you drop Kentucky or Oklahoma or Vandy into the ACC, they're not winning the conference.
Yeah.
That's not how this works.
The problem is strength of schedule does matter, that's why I think ESPN has a metric called strength of record that is a lot better, that just measures how, I believe it's how likely it is an average top 25 team would have your record given your schedule. So that's better than just strength of schedule. But unfortunately, it's not like the NFL where not all teams are roughly created equal. Like, obviously, strength of schedule, you got to look at it in a very subjective ranking that is the college football playoff ranking. Like in the NFL, it's a lot easier. Strength of schedule is just basically your opponent's win-loss record, right? You can't really do that for college football, the way how big the gap is for some of these teams. But so do we both agree? So obviously, Oregon is definitely gonna be number 1. Georgia's gonna be number 2.
Yep.
Would you put Boise 3? I think I would put Boise 3.
I get the argument for Arizona State.
I get it, but I would still put Boise 3. They lost by 3 to Oregon, who's undefeated.
I'm cool with either, but I do get what Arizona State, what the argument's saying. I understand.
Yeah. So would you do Boise, though, at 3?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Boise 3, Arizona State 4. And then what would you do after that? Because I think this is where it starts. Because I don't know 5 through 8. Because I do think Tennessee's a 9. I would be very shocked if Tennessee hosts a game in the first round.
I think.
Does Texas stay at 5 after losing in overtime, or do they put Notre Dame at 5? I think those are the two that I imagine would be 5.
Let's see. Notre Dame lost to Georgia twice.
No, Texas.
Texas lost to Georgia.
Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois.
Yeah. They sure did.
They sure did do that.
Sure did. I think I'd have Texas 5. Because if you had Texas ahead of Notre Dame at 11-1, again, it's the conference title punishment. Now, does 5 versus 6 really matter when it comes to the end result of it? And who you're playing and whatever. Okay, so one's going to end up playing Boise and one will play Arizona State, and they both get home games. I think as far as that argument goes between the two, does it matter that much? Not really. But I'm actually tempted to think, especially, and I think they're going to look at that game yesterday, even though it was with Gunnar Stockton for the second. Still went to overtime, and Texas really beat themselves.
Yeah.
Which is an issue. You don't want to beat yourself. That's the easiest way to lose a football game. But I think for me, it's probably, the more I think about it, Texas 5, Notre Dame 6.
Yep.
And then you have an Ohio State, Penn State question. And I think going with the head-to-head there, and Ohio State's got a couple of better wins than Penn State does.
Yeah.
I think it's Ohio State.
They lost by 1 to Oregon, at Oregon.
Big problem now is, are they trying to avoid rematches? Because if you have Ohio State 7,
it'd be Indiana 10.
Pretty sure you're getting Indiana 10. And do they really want them playing again?
That might be the thing. And I think Penn State did not play Indiana this year. So it'd be
correct.
Penn State playing Indiana,
which is a football game I'd just love to see.
I would love to see it. Then it'll be Ohio State, Tennessee, and then it would be Notre Dame against, assuming SMU is the one that gets in. It would be Notre Dame against Clemson, and then SMU against Texas.
See, that'd be fun.
So.
See, if Notre Dame were to drop enough, I'd love to see Notre Dame versus Indiana also. Just the in-state thing would be fun. But SMU Texas would be spectacular too when you think about that, and just the in-state thing, and Kevin Jennings going against the top 3 defense in the country, that'd be fun too. But no, I think especially in these home environments too, and just seeing which ones, and which one we might be going to as well. Some of them are
maybe 2. If we can do Midwest has been pretty kind to us in terms of the playoff too. If we could pull it off. We'd be. If one of them was a Friday night game, we could do Friday and Saturday.
Okay, maybe Notre Dame on a Friday and Ohio State on a Saturday.
That'll rock.
That'd be fun.
That would make up for me not going.
I know Eli's mad because we're sitting here talking about Tennessee not getting a home game, because I would go down there. We have.
I would go there. Either, yeah, but I would definitely go there.
But I think the one thing you mentioned too, outside Oregon doesn't have a major flaw, but I think it is interesting how all the rest of these teams we can point to like a big problem. Okay, we could go through all of them. I mean, Georgia, all of a sudden there's a quarterback issue.
Yeah, and your receiving core. If Becky's even healthy, your receiving core is still a problem.
If that is a Brock Purdy type of elbow injury that Carson Beck has, that's an issue. You might not win a national title without Carson Beck.
They're not winning a national title without Carson Beck.
I don't think so.
No.
Kirby's, I mean,
that would be the coaching job of a lifetime if you did that.
You're not kidding. You go, okay, Boise State, group of 5 team, they're not as loaded as some of these other teams, right? Arizona State, they have their flaws in the trenches, and look, they give A+ effort, and there's a lot of dangerous.
And they lost their top receiver for the season.
And Jordan Tyson being out is still a problem. I think I know they blew out Iowa State without him, but you go through Ohio State's offensive line.
Big problem.
Yeah. Huge problem. I'm just curious who they play in the first round, because I'm concerned for Ohio State. Not only the morale coming off another Michigan loss, Ohio State against any defensive front, if they had to play Tennessee, they'd have a major issue. Yeah. I'm not sure who I'd pick in that game. They would have a major – James Pierce Jr., Omar Norman-Lott, Josh Josephs, all those guys up front. Ohio State's offensive line is an issue, right? What did we talk about it since the Oregon game? It's like a bottom 20 offensive line.
Yeah.
That could kill your whole season.
Yeah.
You could have as many weapons you want. You can have the quarterback. You can have anything. If you can't block people, you're going to have a hard time winning a national championship, right? So you got that. Notre Dame.
If you take away the run, I don't know if they can win through the air.
That would be the thing for me.
Yeah.
Is the lack of receivers.
Yeah.
For Notre Dame. And
also Riley Leonard's a passer has been.
They've played a super soft schedule.
Yeah.
It's a soft. Their best win is still A&M in week 1.
Yeah.
It's a soft schedule. Obviously, the NIU lost. Now, they've dominated everybody else. They played a reasonably competitive game last week with USC. USC scored, 35 points on them, was it? 38, somewhere in there? I mean, USC, really good day offensively, and I would be concerned. If there is a team that can jump out ahead of Notre Dame, I'd be concerned. Penn State.
Penn State receivers, yeah.
It's going to be that. Can they throw outside the numbers?
And they proved they couldn't do it yesterday.
Yeah.
And they tried it. The one time they did try it, it was a pick that sealed the game. So
can Penn State throw outside the numbers?
Yeah.
Which it's a problem. And I think they're another one. If you're playing a really good defense like a Tennessee in that first – that's the one for me. Whoever's playing Tennessee in this first round, especially if it's one of those two teams, that's a problem.
Yeah.
I think that's a real problem. Tennessee, we've seen their defense is great all year. Dylan Sampson's been great all year. And Nico's getting better.
Yeah.
Perfect? It's not always perfect.
Their O-line's a problem, too.
That is a problem for them also.
Their O-line has not.
If you get Ohio State versus Tennessee,
it could be an ugly game.
It could look like Ohio State, Michigan.
Yeah, it could be ugly.
You just got neither team can block anybody.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, that'll be. You got some fun matchups, and I still look. Some people are out off the boat based on what we saw against Ohio State. I still think Indiana is dangerous.
No, they're good.
I don't care. They're really darn good. And I think Ohio State is just.
Their question is, do they have the top end talent to truly make a run? That's the question.
I have problems with them in pass protection, too.
Yeah.
If there's a heavy blitzing team, especially that gets after them and gets after Curtis Rourke, because there's not a whole lot of improv from Curtis Rourke, that would be an issue. If they did play Penn State and they're going to – can Curtis Rourke do – let's say they play Penn State, even though it's in conference. Can he do the same thing Dylan Gabriel did last night? And get rid of the ball quickly and get it where it needs to be, because there's no improv with Curtis. Can he do that? Because I think in these couple of games where he struggled, he's gotten blitzed, pressure's gotten home, and there's not much beyond the design of the play that he can get to.
Yeah.
If they pass protect, I think Indiana could beat a lot of these teams. I've been a big believer in them all year, even through the soft schedule and all the criticism, but they're dangerous. I don't care. And give Kurt Cignetti 3 weeks to prepare. Let's go.
Yeah.
Or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. I think this playoff's going to be fascinating.
What are the fatal flaws for, say, an SMU? Let's throw SMU, Clemson, and even Alabama in, just in case they do Alabama. What do you think the fatal flaws are there?
Okay, SMU.
It's kind of like the Indiana thing where it's like they're good all around, but it's like the top end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of elite on their team.
Yeah.
And I think I'm curious how they come out of last night if they make it. They got rattled early.
Yeah.
Now, they punched back and they tied the game, but they were rattled early. It felt like the environment was a lot for them early in that game, and that's why they looked a little shaky. Once they settled in, especially after halftime, they were good. They can be explosive. I hate that R.J. Maryland tore his ACL. I hate that.
I know. He's a great tight end.
He's so good. He's a game breaker at tight end, or loosely on that offense we call it tight end, but it is what it is. But no, I think you're right. SMU, it's just how good are they?
Yeah.
Like, are they equal with Clemson, or is there anything better than that, right? And then, was it Alabama? Oh, boy, it's just so high and low with Alabama. This is the problem.
It's the Milroe thing.
The flaw with Alabama is that they are what they are. And if you take away Milroe's legs, there's not a lot of answers. And then Clemson, I think it's just offensive consistency.
Yep.
That one drive they can look great, and the next they don't, and they don't execute. But anyway, we are finally
we're here
to it right now. I got on the soapbox for you, Stalin, for this.
No, I appreciate it. We needed it because we needed to kill like 20 minutes there. Officially now, we're getting the bracket right now. Oregon, number 1, no surprise there. Georgia, number 2, no surprise there. So nothing surprising there. Pretty easy chalk right there for 1-2.
As it should be, yep.
3-4, here's the interesting conversation. Do they put Arizona State above Boise State, or do they keep the Broncos as the number 3 team over Arizona State?
Dominant win for Arizona State.
And now they're stalling again. They're stalling.
Well,
now I love, dude. They know what they're doing. They know exactly what people are waiting to
live
see.
TV, we're having fun today.
They're like, hey, let's get rid of the first 2. Everyone knows what's going to happen. All right, cool. We're good with that. All right, let's go.
Boy, am I glad we got to sleep in a little bit. I'll tell you that. Wait,
Yeah.
Man, 10:30 show saved my life today.
If we had to do a 9 a.m. show, we'd be stalling for 2.5 hours. We'd be stalling.
Oh, not just that. I don't know if I would have made it.
I think we would have.
We got home at 2:30.
We would have stopped the show and then restarted a new show to do the playoff reaction. We would have taken a break for 2 hours and then come back. But we're still waiting. We're still waiting on the number 3 and number 4 right now. They're still comparing Boise State, Arizona State, and Clemson because theoretically those are the 3 relays between Boise State and Arizona State.
The show that they make out of this.
That's it. They know it. They know it.
They're big on suspense over there at the network, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. So again, just recap what we know so far: Oregon's number 1, Georgia's number 2, Boise State's number 3.
They did put Boise number 3. Okay, it is what it is. And honestly, I think considering the matchups, I don't know that it matters. The difference between 3 and 4, I don't think matters a whole lot. And part of the reason too, it's a very even field. It is. Yeah. I mean, okay, if you sit there and you go, would you rather play Texas or Ohio State or Notre Dame? I go, they're all pretty darn good. So what's the difference? And then the only difference there would be, okay, if you get a 6-11 and we're getting Ohio State versus Clemson, let's say, even then, if the underdog wins in Clemson, because they would be, but you still have to play Clemson.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not – so, maybe it's just not as big a deal, and they're just going to chalk it up, and there's Arizona State at 4 right there, well-deserved. I mean, again, the year we talked all year about Curt Cignetti. But I'll tell you what, there's going to be some voters associated with the Big 12 and out west that say, you know what, maybe Kenny Dillingham's the coach of the year. You could even argue maybe it's a coin flip. And again, Cignetti did a great job. But now with the way the Sun Devils finished their season – with a conference title when they were picked last. I don't think Indiana was picked last in the Big Ten.
No, they weren't.
No, and I mean, we talked about their schedule. Like, we talked about Indiana in the preseason as, like, there was some potential. I think I had them when I did my projection. I was like, I think this team could go like 8-4. I didn't think 11-1 was on the table. And I was like, they're going to make a bowl game. They're going to win a bowl game. And now they're getting even better than that, and they're going to be in this field somewhere here. But Arizona State – just an incredible job.
Yeah, so just
getting this far.
Just to recap, the teams that will be getting a first-round bye in the college football playoff: Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, Arizona State. So Clemson will be playing a first-round playoff game, even though they won the ACC. So those are the 4 that we got right now. Now we're the fun stars. Now we figure out what are the seeding. Do they put in SMU? Do they put in Alabama? How do they order 5 through 8? This is where it gets really fun, because I think we kind of had a feeling these were the 4 that would get the conference bye. We didn't think, or the first round bye, we didn't think Clemson would jump all the way at 10-3 to get it. Clemson getting the 12th seed.
So this is interesting also. I want to point something out. So obviously they're the 4th seed. Arizona State is the number 12 team.
Yeah.
Okay, which means, I think if my math is right here, and Boise State's at 9, so they're already included. If SMU is left out, they will have dropped them all the way to number 13.
Yeah.
And Bama will be 11 here. Did that loss last night really justify dropping them from 8 to 13?
So they kept SMU above Clemson if they keep him in.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
On the entire resume, I don't hate it. And this was kind of my argument with South Carolina and Alabama when we were having that argument with the head-to-head was, it's not like they got blown out. They lost that game by 2 points. All right, first round.
Clemson, Texas.
Clemson at Texas.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy.
Clemson at Texas. Winner plays Arizona State.
Dabo versus
So they kept Texas at number 5, even though they lost the backup quarterback. I don't necessarily hate that.
And I'll tell you what. The way Clemson's defense has kind of picked things up the last 4 weeks. Remember, I just mentioned moving Peter Woods back inside.
And listen, Kelvin Banks Jr., if he's still out,
problem.
That's a big problem.
Yeah, we got a couple weeks before that. And you know what? A Clemson defense, a Dabo with some time to prepare, a Quinn Ewers the way he's playing, might have a lot better game. And your favorite thing, 2 5-star quarterbacks.
That's right.
Of course.
That's true.
Your favorite thing ever. You get Cade versus Quinn in that game. But, no, I mean, I think the more I think about that matchup, that's a really good football game.
I'm
Clemson's
excited.
Defense, that's really going to come down to which quarterback can be make more consistent positive plays. And I think it's a lot closer than we think it is.
So just to recap, again, Clemson, the first round game we know. Clemson at Texas, the winner plays Arizona State in the quarterfinal.
That's fun.
That's a fun game.
That's a whole lot of fun. Here we go.
Penn State and Indy Lions are the 6th seed, so they kept them above Ohio State, even though Ohio State has the head-to-head, and they kept Penn State above Notre Dame at 11-1.
Yeah, well, and I think when you look at, again, the losses by a touchdown, you mentioned this, to Ohio State and Oregon, and are you going to punish Penn State for playing on conference title weekend?
Yeah.
Is that fair? Especially when they played a really good game against Oregon.
Yeah,
and Drew Allen
the best
looked
team in the
away
country.
against the best team in the country. I could totally justify this. I have no issue with this whatsoever.
So just for recap, so Penn State number 6, who's the 11th seed now? Is it SMU? Is it SMU or is it Alabama? We find out right now who is making the college football playoff.
It should be SMU.
So the winner plays Boise State in the quarterfinal. But this is the big question right now. All right, they gave it a. They're skipping. They're skipping. They know what they're doing.
The TV.
They know.
The network knows. They know.
I love that.
Oh man, the network. That was
when I saw a
hurt.
team flash on the screen. I was like, oh, here we go. And there was Notre Dame. I was like, wait, Notre Dame's the 11? I was like, wait.
Penn State's going to be the last team to see their opponent. Which also, hold up now. Notre Dame's at 7.
Yeah.
If Indiana's number 10,
woo! We got a battle for Indiana.
We're getting an in-state. We're getting maybe the biggest game other than any Colts game in the history of the state of Indiana.
So now we know Notre Dame is a 7th seed. So they are hosting a game, and the winner of that game plays Georgia in the second round. So we'll see who Notre Dame plays. Maybe they'll skip again to go to the 8th seed.
Okay, so now you mentioned about who might want to play against Georgia. Notre Dame and their defense, if they're playing Georgia with a backup quarterback, oh boy.
There you go. Ohio State's the 8th seed. Ohio State is hosting the first-round playoff game.
We might be going to 2 games.
Here we go.
Oh, boy.
And we got to find out what day they are. But Ohio State's hosting, I would imagine. So Ohio State, Dalton, if they win, they play Oregon in a rematch. And it was maybe the game of the year.
And I'll tell you something first, though. If we think the 9 is Tennessee,
they got to get through that
that's
first.
A serious problem, I think, for Ohio State. That could be a major problem with Ohio State's offensive line and where that could go. If we think it's going to be Ohio State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Indiana, and then we're getting down to whoever the 11 is here, which I still believe should be SMU. I'm
a little scared now. Now I'm a little scared because I really thought they're going to keep SMU below Clemson.
Yeah, but to drop SMU.
No, I understand. I understand.
Clemson in the rankings, you see here, is number 16.
Yeah.
You can't drop SMU below Clemson unless you made them 17 in the rankings. Which would be
absurd.
Which would be absurd. So it's really now about, they went with the entirety of the resume. It also makes me think, because they didn't move Clemson up that much in the rankings. What did they come into that game? 20? There's Ohio State, Tennessee right there.
Yeah, Ohio State, Tennessee to play Oregon in the second round. So 2 games we know. Clemson at Texas, Tennessee at Ohio State. Those are the 2 first-round games that we know right now.
One thing to note there also, and this is where the seeding and the conference title thing gets kind of weird, is so Ohio State and Tennessee are 8-9 in the seeding, but they're 6-7 in the rankings.
Yeah.
So you're sitting here talking about that's actually the most heavyweight matchup of this first round, and somewhere where both of those teams are going to, after the season, I'm sure they're going to complain and go, well, we had to play each other, and we were actually 6-7.
And then whoever wins that plays Oregon.
And then we had to play the number 1. If there's any 2 teams that are going to question the structural integrity of how this is done, it's going to be Ohio State and Tennessee, because immediately Texas, Clemson, great game. If we get Notre Dame, Indiana, great game. Ohio State, Tennessee is the premier game of these first 4. Yeah, I think it's a toss-up game the way Ohio State's offensive line has been playing, and I'll tell you what, Nico is a redshirt freshman having to go into Columbus and play in that environment. We're going to that. Oh, of course we're going to that. Eli's going to that.
Oh, we got to force it. Yeah, we got to make Eli come with us.
We don't have him mic'd up today, but I am sure we're going. There's our buddy Mitch too talking about. We're going to Ohio State, Tennessee for sure.
Just to recap again: Clemson at Texas, winner plays Arizona State. Tennessee at Ohio State, winner plays Oregon. Now we got to figure out who plays Penn State in the first round and who plays Notre Dame in the first round. Indiana, Notre Dame.
Oh,
we got the battle for Indiana.
Please let it be on a Friday.
Indiana.
I'll go to that. And
we make the trip.
And I'll tell you something. I don't think Indiana's defense played that bad against Ohio State. Their offense put them in bad spots. Their defense was spectacular against Michigan when we went and saw that game. Indiana's run defense against Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love and the rushing offense of Notre Dame, prime time.
Yep.
Absolutely love it.
So Indiana at Notre Dame, winner plays Georgia. Now we find out the final team. Will it be Alabama at Penn State, or will it be SMU at Penn State with the winner playing Boise State? This is what we find out right now. This is the biggest question going in.
Getting a Penn State night game or what?
Might be. Yeah, it might be. So we'll see. Now that here we go. They're comparing the resumes again. So again, the biggest question now is: will it be 9-3 Alabama, or will it be 11-2 SMU, who just lost the ACC title game? Which one will they put in between those 2 schools?
It would feel weird if they dropped SMU all the way to 13th.
Yeah.
In the rankings with Clemson. Well, or with Alabama, they came in sitting at what, 12?
Yeah,
in the rankings originally. Boy, I mean, they're just going to make us stare at this bracket for as long as possible. Yeah. We got NFL Sunday to get to. Come on.
Exactly.
Come on, network.
We got 25 minutes to NFL Sunday.
I
know.
SMU. Eli's got the Bengals tomorrow. He'll be okay. And I'm not. I'll watch the Jets on all 22.
All right. So the final one, we got to figure out who is playing Penn State at Happy Valley with a winner taking on Boise State. Will it be Alabama, or will it be SMU?
If you're Penn State, do you have a preference?
I'd rather play SMU. I would rather play SMU than Alabama. I think there's a ceiling there with Alabama that I'm a little afraid of. So I would rather personally play
the Jalen Milroe factor.
That's exactly
essentially what it is.
Yeah,
boy. Oh
but
boy. I mean,
that doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter who you want to play. It matters who deserves to be there.
Tell you what, though, the way Drew Aller played last night. And I'll tell you what, the winner of this game, and it is
SMU.
SMU, they only dropped them to 10 in the rankings, the 11th seed. And I was just going to say the winner of that game is the team that gets to play Boise State. How about that? Wouldn't it? If it were Penn State, real hypothetical, real quick, not counting out SMU, but you get your Penn State Nittany Lions against Ashton Ginty.
Oh yeah,
PFF alum Ashton Ginty. Man, oh man,
that'd be awesome.
Fun. But Penn State, SMU, they left SMU in, and look, we have to assume it is the effort and the way they came back, tied the game in the final 20 seconds. Kevin Jennings, I think that saved their season.
Yep.
Had they rolled over after an awful first quarter and lost to Clemson 42-14. I don't think they'd be sitting in this spot. But SMU playing against Clemson in Charlotte in essentially something close to a road environment in the ACC title game in their first year in the ACC. And I'll tell you what, a little retribution here for the ACC after getting shafted to me on the Florida State thing.
They got shafted, yeah.
2 teams in.
Yeah.
2 teams in. The Big 12 ends up with 1. Notre Dame obviously gets a spot. And 2 teams in from the ACC, and I think both well-deserved. Clemson, they earned it. They got a little lucky. Did you see Dabo giving credit again to Fran Brown last night after the game? Of course, Fran Brown and Syracuse, you messed up the whole playoff bracket.
We did.
You did. Your Syracuse Orange messed up the entire playoff bracket.
Our Syracuse Orange.
If Alabama has anyone to blame, it is Kyle McCord and the Syracuse Orange.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, yeah, just recap again. Number 1 is Oregon. They will be playing the winner of Tennessee and Ohio State in the 8-9 game. Number 2 is Georgia. They're playing the winner of Notre Dame and Indiana in the 7-10 game. Number 3, Boise State. They're playing the winner of number 6, Penn State, and number 11, SMU. And number 4 is Arizona State playing the winner of Texas and Clemson, meaning Alabama is left out of the college football playoff. After many thought they shouldn't have been in last year, and now they get left out this year in the college football playoff with a 9-3 record.
It comes down to the losses. It does. It's the losses to Vandy, and especially I think you could get over the loss to Vandy. It's the way they lost to
Oklahoma one.
If they had lost to Oklahoma on something fluky, 24-21, some weirdness, something happened there. It was their worst game they played in 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think you have to sit there and go, Alabama lost 2 very winnable games. And I know Vandy and Diego Pavia were resurgent this year also. They had a good season by their standards, but that's still a 6-6 team with not a whole lot in the trenches.
Yeah.
And for parts of that game, Bama was dominated, and they were dominated for the entirety of the Oklahoma game. And the high and low nature of Bama is what really that's what did them in. Because I won't deny the ceiling. They're Alabama, right? And Jalen Milroe on his best day is a top 5 quarterback. But the floor of what they looked like at times, I even go back to early in the fourth quarter of a game against USF when it was a 2-point game. There's just too many times at Alabama where the floor was too low, and I know the metrics and the SEC stuff, but I think they got it right with SMU at 11.
Yep. So that's what we got for our reaction. We now know the official 12-team college football playoff bracket. Of course, we'll be doing our full preview, not this upcoming Tuesday, but I believe the following Tuesday, right?
Yep.
We're doing the preview show for that, so be on the lookout for that coming
17th.
out. Yeah, 17th. We got a week off now. We got a well-needed week off before we get to the college football playoff, but we now know the official bracket for the inaugural 12-team college football playoff. But we want to thank our producers back there, and Tyler and Eli for sticking around with us. Obviously, got to, do a lot of trying to talk a lot before the playoff bracket gets revealed.
And
we were trying to kill time
for
here.
As long as we've been on here, this show is not over yet.
That's true. It's not over yet either. And we've got Ben back there in the studio as well. But we have an interview with the great Jim Nagy. Now talk about the playoff. We talk about the Senior Bowl, some of the top prospects in the NFL draft. Some of them are playing in the college football playoff as well. So let's get to the interview with the executive director of the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy. All right, we got another interview with the great Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl. Jim, thanks for coming on again.
Yeah, good to see you guys.
Of course. So the one question I want to ask you we didn't talk about last week is obviously you guys have been diving into the NFL draft head first. You've been scouting hundreds of players. What do you think are the strengths of the 2025 NFL draft right now?
I would start at running back. It's the best running back group we've seen in a while. And maybe it feels that way more this year for us because we can bring the juniors, so there's just better players. But even the senior class is deeper. I mean, we typically struggle to get 8 senior running backs that are going to get drafted every year. And now having the juniors at our disposal, it helps the group overall. And then I would say the D-line, and really from the inside all the way out to the edge. I mean, it's a really good D-line class.
So, Jim, I actually want to expand on that because that was my next question about the running back class and the talent you already have coming to the Senior Bowl. Guys like Jarquez Hunter, R.J. Harvey, Khalil Mullings, Donovan Edwards, Bashal Tutin already signed up. And last year, you had 10 running backs. These are just 5, and if you're going to have potentially 10, it's a really talented group like you mentioned. I want to know just more specifically, what do you think the strengths of this class are? Is it the number of different types of players and the versatility? Is it just all of the options, the depth of talent? And then do you think the NFL is going through kind of a renaissance at the position from what we've seen this year, obviously with Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley, but it feels like teams that can run the ball are the ones that are succeeding?
Yeah, it's the teams that can get people out of cover too, running the football. So yeah, I think you're seeing more of that. I think it's just the depth, and there's some really good talent up top. I think Ashton Genty's the unquestioned number one guy in the class, in my opinion. I've been on record saying that, but I mean, there's some really good players up high. It'll be. I'll just be curious to see where the run starts at the position. To me, this is always the position that's the hardest to peg what round these guys are going in, just because we've seen so many good running backs go in the 5th, 6th, 7th round over the last handful of years. So what compels these teams to draft these guys up high? Why you spend in a 2nd or a 3rd when you can get a really quality player later in the draft? So I'll be curious if it starts in the 2nd. Or the 3rd. I think it's going to start somewhere on day 2. I really do. I don't think teams are going to wait on Omari and Hampton and Dylan Sampson and some of these other guys. So that will be interesting. And then, there's a lot of different skill sets. There's a lot of different body types. There's some good big backs. A lot of powerful, big, powerful, 225-pound plus guys in this class. But I would just say the depth from rounds 1 through 7, you're going to have a bunch of guys go.
So I wanted to ask you about Ashton Genty for a second, because I think the debate in a lot of football circles is, okay, how high do you take this guy, right? Because a lot of people don't love taking running backs that high in the NFL draft, but you're having a guy in Ashton Genty who's having like an all-time season for a running back. So if you were a GM of an NFL team, if you needed help at the running back position, how high would you be willing to take Ashton Genty, honestly?
Well, where am I picking? But no, I get the question. I mean, he's gonna impact the game on all 3 downs. So I mean. Again, I wasn't really a big believer in the devalue of the running back position in the first place. Like that wasn't, I understand the value, I guess it's a hard question to answer, because when you look at the board in April, there's going to be guys every year in the 5th, 6th round as an evaluator where you're like, I would rather have that guy there than somebody else in the 2nd or 3rd. That you play that game at every position, right? And certainly that's a position I would wait. But Ashton Genty, he's a different player now. And I think what he does in the passing game, I came out early in the summer talking about that he reminded me of LaDainian Tomlinson in the pass game. And that's I don't throw comps out very often, and certainly not lofty ones like that. So that tells you what I think of what the guy could be, an impact player at that level.
Jim, I'll stay on the passing side, and you mentioned it. The NFL is a passing league now. They throw 60% of the time, and we're in 11 personnel more often than ever. And I want to ask you about some slot receivers, because I think it's a position that used to be one, if it was a slot-only type of guy that they call a player, that was kind of an insult, right? But nowadays, I think a slot receiver is essential to an offense. So when you're talking about guys like Tej Johnson and Xavier Restrepo and Jalen Noel, all guys who are going to the Senior Bowl, do you make it a part of your process to find slot receivers like that, guys who are most likely going to play at least 90% in the slot in the NFL, and make sure you get their skill sets shown at the Senior Bowl?
Not really. We're just going after the best players, but it always works out that way. I mean, if you're bringing 16 wide receivers, there's always going to be 4 or 5 of those guys are going to be primary slots. At least that's how it's worked out every year. So we don't go into it thinking we need to take a certain amount of players that can play inside, because you're going to have some guys in the tight end group that can play in the slot down here as well. So that's really doesn't really factor into it. But we like the group so far. I think this is more of an outside heavy receiver class. But so far, there's slots that we have rated up high. We've got most of those guys.
So, John, I want to ask you about the quarterback class real quick, because I think there's some people comparing it to the 2022 class a few years ago. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's a lot more talent in this year's group than there was a few years ago. Obviously, with Cam Ward, a guy who's going to the Senior Bowl, Shedeur Sanders, and other guys like that. What are your guys' thoughts there in Mobile about this year's quarterback group in the NFL draft?
I like the depth to it. I think there's some good players, throughout. Again, it was hard to get down to 8. I mean, there's there's probably 10 to 12 guys that we feel really good about getting drafted based off the work we've done and the feedback we've gotten from teams, when we were going through our roster process with them. So I do like the depth of it. I think there's some guys that could emerge. I think a hot guy right now is Riley Leonard around the league. I mean, it started off in like that 4th, 5th round area, and now everything I'm hearing from guys in the league is that he's not getting out of day 2. So, he's probably the hottest guy. I think Tyler Shuck is going to impress a lot of people down here. The Louisville quarterback, just with the way he throws the football. The guy's got a lot of horsepower in his arm, and that'll be on display. So, again, I think there's a lot to be worked through. I think there's a lot of guys that are talented enough to start in the league. Some of these guys have had some rocky patches through the year. It hasn't been all clean. I think, Carson Beck, certainly is a guy that's had some rougher patches than we probably expected coming into the year. Jalen Milroe. But they've also had some great patches, and they've also done some things pulling themselves out of those rough spots that will impress NFL teams. I mean, part of being a good quarterback is having some resiliency and being able to bounce back, and those guys have shown that. Both those guys I mentioned. I shouldn't have singled those guys out. I mean, there's basically I don't know if there's a quarterback in this class that's played, had a Jaden Daniels type clean season yet. So, but I do like the depth of the class overall.
So I want to ask you about the guys that protect those quarterbacks. That's the offensive linemen, and it feels like more than ever the last couple of years we've heard loud debates about whether this guy should play guard or he should play tackle, and height and weight and arm length. And we see it even with some of the top prospects in this draft, right? There's debates about one scout thinks he's a left guard, one thinks he's a right tackle, this and that. How important is it to get those guys on the field, and for some of them just figure out, and for the 2 NFL coaching staffs that are coaching at the Senior Bowl, figure out what positions these guys might be most comfortable at and how that adds or even decreases from their value?
Yeah, it's imperative, man. It's a huge part of the process for these O-linemen. I mean, that's why I think the agent community really understands how much offensive linemen can benefit by coming down here and showing off the versatility. I mean, a lot of them get plugged in as a freshman or sophomore on their offensive line in college, and they never move. So being able to show that versatility, like Cody Mauch a couple years ago, played all 5 spots in the game. He literally played all 5 spots in the Senior Bowl game. You've got guys like Zion Johnson had never snapped a ball before coming down here. Quinn Miners had never snapped a ball before coming down here. Cole Strange had never snapped a ball. So some guys can really show off their versatility. And really one guy that I don't talk about a lot that really helped himself was Robert Hainsey, Notre Dame right tackle a few years ago. We had Liam Eichenberg committed to playing the game, the left tackle, and we hadn't invited Robert. We had like a 6th, 7th round grade on him, and he was kind of below the line for the game. And Brian Kelly called, and he went to bat for his guy, and he's like, Jim, he's a 2-time captain here at Notre Dame. He's got X amount of starts. And I told him, like, Brian, this is where we got him. He's a late round guy. It's kind of below the cut line. We see him as, kind of a right tackle guard. And, I put him in the game, and he came down here and played center. And his center work looked better than anything he put on tape at Notre Dame at guard or tackle. And he ends up going in the 3rd round of the Tampa Bay Bucks. So, I mean, to me, he's the perfect case of guys playing different positions. And that's the biggest thing when I talk to these offensive linemen. Like when I was on campus at William and Mary inviting Charles Grant, I told him, like, be ready to move around, man, because, just your willingness to put yourself out there and not be afraid of it and embrace the challenge of it is going to impress these NFL teams. Like, none of them are going to think you're going to look like an all-pro and you're lining up a position you haven't played, but just the willingness to do it, I think, shows these teams the buy-in because, it's really hard to be a one-position guy in the NFL unless you're like an elite entrenched starter. I mean, at some point you're going to look what the Packers have done with Elton Jenkins.
Yeah.
Another Senior Bowl guy, just moving him around whenever they have an injury. Like Elton's the guy that moves, it seems like. So, it's really key for those guys. And again, to me, that's one of the big benefits of the week down here.
So you mentioned Charles Grant. We're very excited to see him down there. Another 2 offensive linemen we're very excited to see down there as well, Jim, are Ariante Ursary and Wyatt Milan. They're both first-round prospects on the PFF big board right now. Can you just break down both their games and what really enticed you so much about them and why you excited to invite to them to the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, Ursary's he's a big human being. And the biggest thing that stands out, he can move people off the ball. He's probably further ahead in the run game than the pass game. In my opinion, it's hard to find guys that can move people. It really is. So I think he can play both sides of the ball. I think he can play guard and tackle. I think he can be a four position guy. And the pass pro stuff got better this year. I mean, that's where I got excited about him. Watched the development over the course of the season in pass protection. And then Wyatt Milam, again, you talked about arm length and stuff like that getting picked apart with some of these guys. I think that's going to be the question. Does Wyatt stay out there on the edge? Can he survive out there with his feet and his patience and his feel? Or does he have to move inside and play guard? And the way those guys talk about him at West Virginia and just like the wiring and the brain, like I would love to try that guy at center as well. So no, those guys are two really cool prospects. We're excited to get both of them. We've had some big D-line ads over the last couple of days, and so that it's going to make for some really good one-on-ones again this year.
Jim, we got conference championship week coming up. We obviously have the playoffs coming. Are there any guys specifically on these teams that are still alive in this national championship race that you're looking at in their last game this weekend or the last couple games that I know you don't have the full roster set up yet for the Senior Bowl, but are there any guys you're keeping your eye on for kind of a stock up, stock down kind of thing through conference title weekend and through the playoffs?
Honestly, I'm really not. I feel pretty good about where we're at. If I were working for a team, I certainly would. If I were working for a team, I would be really, really zeroed in on how these quarterbacks play. I'm keeping close attention to this Texas-Georgia game and seeing how Ewers and Carson Beck show up on a big stage like that. But for us, we feel pretty good about it. I mean, here we are 12 games into the season, and I don't think much is going to change in terms of where we got guys on the board right now.
Jim, we have a ton more questions to ask you, but of course we got you next because we don't want to waste all of them yet. But I really appreciate you taking time out once again.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me on again.